Recording.
All right, I think we're good. We have meeting members here. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Health, Education, and Welfare Committee. I am Councillor Jack Eccles, the chair. Joining me are Vice Chair Jamaluddin and voting members, Councillor McMaster, Councillor McNaught, Councillor Migliarelli, and President Grigoritis, and non-voting members, Councillor Trementozzi and Councillor Snell. This notice provides a notice of quorum for the record pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. The meeting of the Health, Education, and Welfare Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Melrose website and mmtv3.org. As always, public comment is encouraged by emailing citycouncil@cityofmelrose.org. At this time, I would entertain a motion to open public comment.
Motion to open the floor for public comment.
Second.
Motion to open public comment made by Councillor McNaught, seconded by Councillor Migliarelli. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councillor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
Councillor McMaster.
Yes.
Councillor McNaught.
Yes.
Councillor Migliarelli.
Yes.
President Grigoritis.
Yes.
Chair Eccles.
Yes. So this is the portion of the meeting where any member of the public could comment on anything on tonight's agenda. If there are any attendees that would like to make a comment, they could raise their hand.
So I'm looking in the chat. I'll see if anyone has raised their virtual hand. Give it a second. I'm looking. There are 13 people in the chat. I do not see. Oh, Eric Denoto. Yes, I see someone. I'm going to make someone named Eric Denoto. I'm going to allow his audio. Mr. Denoto, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
We can. You're
Terrific.
in public comment.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chairperson Eccles and members of the City Council. I appear before you this evening, virtually of course, in support of Order 2020-69 on behalf of my fellow trustees of Melrose Memorial, Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Building.
Mr. Denoto, I'm going to stop you for a second. We're in Health, Education, and Welfare, and you're speaking of an order that is coming before the Council and Appropriations at 7:15.
And I will stand fast.
Sure, no problem. I'm going to remute you. Please hold. So if there's any members of the public right now wishing to speak in Health, Education, and Welfare, if you could raise your virtual hand. All right, I don't see anybody. Councillor Eccles.
Is there a motion to close public comment?
Motion to close public comment.
Second.
Motion to close public comment made by Councillor McNaught, seconded by Vice Chair Jamaluddin. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Councillor Jamaluddin, sorry.
Yes.
Councillor McMaster.
Yes.
Councillor McNaught.
Yes.
Councillor Migliarelli.
Yes.
President Grigoritis.
Yes.
Chair Eccles.
Yes.
5 yes.
Okay. The first item on tonight's agenda is Order 2020-85, a resolution honoring the Melrose chapter of the 84 movement fighting youth tobacco use in Massachusetts. I will go ahead and read the resolution, and then there will be an order for the suspension of the rules as we have some members of the 84 movement and the administration here with us tonight. So, whereas 2,800 youth in Massachusetts become daily smokers each year, whereas 15 million packs of cigarettes are smoked by youth each year, whereas there has been an increase in sale and marketing of flavored tobacco and vape products that has triggered an increase in youth tobacco use, whereas the 84 movement is a Massachusetts-based statewide advocacy group fighting youth tobacco use in Massachusetts. The 84 in their name represents the 84% of Massachusetts youth who did not smoke at the movement's inception, whereas the Melrose chapter of the 84 movement consists of the following Melrose High School students: Amber Chow, Emily Chow, Celine Chevathamanen, Isaac Cushman, Mackenzie Donovan, Sabrina Gardner, Mary Kate Mahoney, Bridget McCarran, Moeen Mosqueda, Judal Noel, Brady Pitcher, Lena Fan, Ruby Robichow, Ruth Sands, Sophia Totino, Caitlin Reagan, Janice Tang, Matthew Whalen, and Sandy Yu. Whereas the Melrose chapter of the 84 movement was a finalist selected from the close to 100 chapters statewide for the 84 Peer Outreach Award due to their outstanding work to prevent youth tobacco use in Melrose over the past year. Whereas the 84 movement's advisor, Bob Savarino, has been an advocate for youth tobacco use prevention in our community for years and was nominated for the 84 movement's Adult Advisor Award. Be it resolved that we, the Melrose City Council, recognize and applaud these achievements, and that this resolution, signed by each member and the mayor, be spread upon the permanent records of the city of Melrose, and be it further resolved that a special copy be presented to all on this 4th day of May in the year 2020. Being that, is there a motion to suspend the rules to hear from our members?
Motion to suspend the rules?
Seconded.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Counselor Jamaluddin,
Yes.
Counselor McMaster,
Yes.
Counselor McNaught,
Yes.
Counselor Migliorelli,
Yes.
President Gregoritis,
Yes.
Chair Eccles.
Yes.
5 yes. The mayor is in queue. I would like to bring him in as a panelist to speak to the order.
Yes, and I believe we have Janice, who's a student who will be joining us as well.
Okay. You should be coming in momentarily.
Perfect.
Am I up?
Mayor Broder, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay.
I can't see me, but that's probably for the best. I'll speak very briefly. I've been involved in the anti-tobacco movement and the youth smoking prevention movement for a long time, starting out on the city council. And I just want to say a couple of things. I want to thank Mr. Savarino for all his work over the years, and that I know is going to continue into the future. And also to recognize both the students who are before you right now and their predecessors, because I can tell you from past experience and from what I know now, there are two things about this that are really important. Peer-to-peer education is the most effective thing you can do to stop kids from starting smoking, from starting tobacco use, and from getting addicted. The other thing I can tell you is that youth advocacy is an extraordinary tool. And I can tell you, as someone who was up on Beacon Hill when it happened, that without the 84 movement and without the activism of the youth who came back to the State House and back to the State House and back to the State House, we would not have the e-cigarette restrictions and the flavor ban that is a critical piece in making sure kids don't get hooked on this stuff. So I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
We could probably hear from Health Director Clay, who's also with us today.
Great, thank you very much. I want to reiterate Mayor Broder comment about how youth-to-youth education is absolutely the most effective, and how proud I am of this group as well as their predecessors. I've had the privilege of joining the youth group, small amounts as we've gone to Washington over the years. We've met with Senator Brown, Senator Markey, Senator Warren, and the kids are just, they're so eloquent and so professional. I wish you could be there to see how well they represent the city. It's really a pleasure. And Mr. Sav has done an outstanding job keeping the youth group going, not only on tobacco, but with substance use in general. We've been doing this now for almost 20 years in Melrose, and we've been able to transition from a federally supported program to a Melrose supported program, which is really, really important. So I want to congratulate Mr. Sav and the kids on being nominated for this fantastic award.
Mr. Savarino.
Sure. Thank you, Ruth, and thank you
Mayor Broder and the council for the recognition on behalf of the Youth Action Team. We really appreciate it. We have been very fortunate to have a great group of dedicated students who show up very early in the morning before school, and they're there for a cause. They're there to learn about substance abuse prevention and to learn what they can do about it. And the peer-to-peer education piece is huge. The advocacy piece is huge. Um, the peer mentoring, the peer education, the leadership skills they develop. It's in working with the 84 program, we've been very lucky. They've been very supportive. They've provided us with some great opportunities, some opportunities to earn some stipends. And one of the things that I'm most happy about, we worked on a couple of projects that the 84 sponsored that paid us some substantial amount of money. And our group decided to donate that money to Jeff Bolduck, who is a guidance counselor who helps me with the Youth Action Team. And Jeff took it upon himself to develop a relationship with a care and assistance dog, support dog for the high school. And Tinker is an honorary member of the Youth Action Team, and she has become a Red Raider superstar. And Jeff had to raise a substantial amount of money to be able to bring her into the school. And I'm just very happy that we were able to, through the 84, raise some money to help him do that. And I think that's one of the best things that we've done. We've done some peer education in the 6th grade. We've done some information sessions in the high school. Vaping obviously has become the thing, and the offshoots of vaping as the industry evolves. So we continue to work on that. The legislative advocacy, as a matter of fact, our group met with virtually with the Wakefield Youth Action Team this afternoon, and we are combining efforts to deal with our state legislators to provide them with some additional information. So the work is ongoing. As I said, the vaping tobacco industry is evolving, and we have to continue to evolve with them to try to stay at least a half a step ahead of them in terms of providing information to the peers, for our students to provide information to their peers. So thank you again. Appreciate it. Appreciate the recognition from the 84. I think they were very kind to the old guy this year, but it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Awesome. I think we have one of the students joining us as well.
We do. I'm making her a panelist now. I believe it's Janice.
Is Janice with us?
Yeah.
Janice is one of the members of our group, senior member, who is on the statewide leadership team of the 84 movement. So she has had a leadership position at the state level, one of 12 or 14 students in the state to help run the 84 movements. She can tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the 84, it's called the 84 because when we started in 2007, there were 84% of students that didn't smoke. And then now the number's up to 94%. And it's basically, I wouldn't say it's like because of our work, but like we focus on kind of educating the youth about the dangers of smoking and vaping, or just more vaping now. And every year we have 2 events. One is the Youth Power Summit, where we primarily focus on just educating students about like our main theme of the year this year, or no, last year it was on menthol and like kind of racial profiling from the tobacco and vaping companies. And so we kind of educate the students from each chapters about that, and then they bring the information they learn back to their cities and towns, and then they teach their peers about it. And then the second event we usually do is called Kick Butts Day, and that's when we talk to legislators about, well, we're not like lobbying to them, but like we're educating them about certain things that's happening in our city and towns, and then kind of hoping that they will pass certain laws, but we're not like asking them to. But yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any counselors wishing to speak? Councilor McNaught?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo the Mayor Brodora's sentiments and Director Clay's sentiments, and want to congratulate the 84, Director Clay, Mr. Savarino, and thank you for being here tonight with us too, Janice, and thank you for all of your hard work. I just wanted to mention that I think that there is a fair amount of us on this council who have had Mr. Savarino as an educator in the Melrose school system.
Jeff.
What's that?
I said, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I say this all as a compliment to say that you've always been there as a great source of support, always a great example of what the right thing to do is. That's the way I always remember you, and obviously that continues on. I would also say that when I was in high school, smoking was could have been much closer to 94% in the opposite direction. I exaggerate a little bit, but there was smoking allowed outside at Melrose High School. So to see how far you've come and how far you brought the class or the high school to 94% non-smoking and working towards this goal is extremely impressive. And I couldn't be happier to be a co-sponsor of this resolution. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Snell?
As a non-voting member, but I just want to chime in and echo everything that Councilor McNaught just said, as your favorite past student. Appreciate, the efforts. So thank you. And thank you, Director Clay as well.
Councilor Thomas?
Again, I am not a voting member on this committee, but I did want to say thank you to Director Clay, Kathy Guevara for all her work with the Prevention Coalition, and obviously Mr. Savarino for all his years of dedication. You're doing so much to help our students. If there's anything that you need from the City Council or the City of Melrose that we can assist you with moving forward through the end of this school year and into next school year, please feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to have conversations with you guys offline and see what we can do to help out. It's a great program you guys run there, and the more students we can get involved, the more students we can reach at the high school and hopefully the middle school level as well. So thank you all. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else, I would like to also thank Mr. Savarino and Janice and Health Director Clay for joining us tonight and all you've done. I also had Mr. Savarino as vice principal just a few short years ago. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Are there any motions at this time? The chair would entertain a motion.
I believe the correct motion is to place this resolution on file. Move to place it on file.
Second.
There's a motion to place this resolution on file made by Councilor McNaught, seconded by Councilor Migliarelli. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Jamaluddin,
Yes.
Councilor McMaster,
Yes.
Councilor McNaught,
Yes.
Councilor Migliarelli,
Yes.
President Gregoritis,
Yes.
Chair Eccles,
Yes.
5 yes.
Thank you, everyone, tonight for joining us. We will move further into the HEW agenda for tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The second item on our agenda tonight is Order 2020-86, reappointment of Michael Stankovich, 9 Harding Road, to the Human Rights Commission for a second full term, set to expire on the last day of February 2023. Is there any motions or discussion at this time?
I move the motion to renew his term.
Second.
Perfect. Motion to recommend for passage, Councilor Jamali, and seconded by Councilor McMaster. On discussion. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Jamaluddin,
Yes.
Councilor McMaster,
Yes.
Councilor McNaught,
Yes.
Councilor Migliarelli,
Yes.
President Gregoritis,
Yes.
Chair Eccles.
Yes.
5 yes.
That concludes our agenda tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Please call, motion to adjourn made by Councilor McNaught, seconded by Councilor Migliarelli. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Jamaluddin,
Yes.
Councilor McMaster,
Yes.
Councilor McNaught,
Yes.
Councilor Migliarelli,
Yes.
President Gregoritis,
Yes.
Chair Eccles.
Yes.
5 yes. I'm gonna hit pause. We are adjourned. Okay, I just resumed.
Ready?
Yeah.
Hit record.
I hit record. Thank you.
Good evening. This is the Appropriations Committee. The date is May 7th, and it's now being 7:21. And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Appropriations Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. We will post audio and video recording of the transcript or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Melrose's website and mmtv.org. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Migliarelli,
Here.
Councilor Tramontosi,
Yes.
Councilor McMaster,
Yes.
Councilor McNaught,
Yes.
Councilor Eccles,
Here.
Councilor Garapay,
Here.
Councilor Stewart, Councilor Thomas,
Here.
Councilor Jamaluddin,
Here.
President Gregoritis,
Here.
Chair Sinella.
Here.
11, actually 10 present. I thought Rob Stewart was in the room though.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Okay, 11
Okay.
present.
Sorry about that.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion for public comment.
Motion
Public comment.
Motion made for public comment by Councilor McNaught, seconded by Councilor Tramontosi. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Migliarelli,
Yes.
Councilor Tramontosi,
Yes.
Councilor McMaster,
Yes.
Councilor McNaught,
Yes.
Councilor Eccles,
Yes.
Councilor Garapay,
Yes.
Councilor Stewart,
Yes.
Councilor Thomas,
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin,
Yes.
President Gregoritis,
Yes.
Chair Sinella.
Yes.
11 yes.
This is the portion of our meeting where anybody from the public who is in queue, they raise their hand. If you go to the bottom of the screen in the middle dot, give you the ability to raise your hand if you like to.
So we do have Eric Denoto from the previous meeting. I'm going to make Mr. Denoto audio accessible. So here we go. Mr. Denoto, can you hear us?
I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you're on.
Sorry for jumping the gun earlier, but again, I want to thank you all for letting me appear this evening in support of Order 2020-69 on behalf of my fellow trustees of the Memorial of Melrose Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Building. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. So out of respect for your time and knowing that there are others who wish to speak as well, my comments will be brief. There is no doubt that the members of this council, as well as virtually all the citizens of Melrose, recognizes the significance of Melrose Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Building to our community and the desperate need for immediate repair of the same. Memorial Hall is not merely a venue. The hall is a majestic, living, active, and vibrant symbol of gratitude and appreciation that the citizens of Melrose have had and continue to have for the men and women who served, fought, and in some cases died in the preservation of our American freedom. Since its dedication in December of 1912, Memorial Hall has been used, as intended, to honor actively serving military members and veterans and serve as a connection to our community. By way of example, Melrose is home to the 1st Battalion of the 182nd Infantry, which is the oldest serving military unit in the nation and it traces its lineage back to the inception of our country's initial fight for freedom. And we're there at Shot Heard Around the World at Lexington and Concord. Memorial Hall has served to honor the 182nd Infantry on several notable occasions, including a wonderful send-off ceremony in 2003 when the unit deployed in support of Homeland Security during Operation Noble Eagle. And the hall later hosted a homecoming for the battalion, friends, and family when it returned from a year-long deployment in Afghanistan in 2012. Not surprisingly, it serves as a location where past and present come together through the Melrose Veterans in the Classroom program, providing our students with access to our local veterans and a unique perspective about the sacrifices of our service members make on our behalf to protect our freedoms. While Memorial Hall is not merely a venue, it does certainly serve as a critical function within our community. The building hosts over 300 diverse public and private events annually, including rehearsals and performances of our city's historic Melrose Symphony Orchestra and other wonderful organizations such as the Melrose Youth Ballet. On average, 60,000 visitors are welcomed, educated, served, entertained, and honored within the walls of Memorial Hall each year. Most recently, Memorial Hall has served as the command center for Melrose Health in the crucial effort to aid members of our community during the COVID-19 pandemic, which, among other things, distribution of food and personal protective equipment. As trustees, we are grateful for the commitment and support of the mayor and city planner toward Memorial Hall, and we respect the administration's confidence in the ability of the city to prudently absorb the costs associated with this project. While we are mindful of the financial uncertainty that may lie ahead, we are also mindful of our collective duty to preserve this great monument to our city's service members' legacy and a certainty of the consequences of our inaction. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak with you this evening, and I hope this continues to find you and your families safe and well.
Thank you, Mr. Donato. Madam Clerk, anybody else?
There is, we have a familiar face, Scott Forbes. I'm going to bring him into the room at this time. It's going to take a second. Scott, can you hear us? You're on mute. Let's unmute you. 1 second. Scott, can you hear us?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
I can. Are you able to?
Welcome to our new format.
Are you able to put your video on?
I'm not.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. I am speaking this evening in favor of order number 2020-69, which authorizes the bond in the amount of $2,311,205 that will be used for building repairs to Memorial Hall. As you all know, Memorial Hall is a city-owned building that serves the greater Melrose community. It serves as a soldiers and sailors memorial, as well as honoring those who served in the United States Armed Forces throughout the years. And Memorial Hall initially got its start as a GAR Hall, and the GAR, which stands for Grand Army of the Republic, was the Organization for Union Veterans of the United States Civil War. And the Soldiers and Sailors Building was then built in 1912 and is now listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. And, you know, growing up in Melrose, Memorial Hall would have been open on select occasions that primarily revolved around veteran events and holidays. And as the previous speaker said, as of last year, you know, Kathy Pickett-Broder and her team have worked tirelessly to provide over 300 events during the calendar year, which includes concerts, recitals, community fundraisers, and sporting events. And I would be remiss if I didn't include all the political pomp and circumstance, which included our inaugural ceremonies for our elected officials, including the City Council. As a retired Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force, I have participated in numerous events and fundraisers that benefit the veteran community. Our annual Veterans in the Classroom event continues to thrive and gain in popularity prior to these current COVID-19 environment times, bringing younger generations of middle and high school students together with local area veterans from all generations and all branches of service. And it's truly been an honor to participate in such worthwhile events. Memorial Hall truly sets a stage for these types of events, along with hundreds of others that are similar in terms of purpose and community engagement. This building does represent our community timeline. It is a symbol of where we started, following all the way to what we have become, one community open to all. Our veteran community is honored to see Memorial Hall become the venue that it is today, as one of the most distinctive performance centers on the North Shore. Now, we have talked for decades now about potential funding opportunities to provide the much needed repairs for this building. And with such a storied past and a time-honored tradition, the order before you this evening is a necessary first step in our commitment to honor the men and women that have served, while continuing to tell the story for those who currently do serve. I do ask that you consider voting in favor of this order before you tonight, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We have an additional, Mr. Jerry Maraz in queue. I'm going to make him panelist at this time. Scott Forbes, I'm going to make you back to attendee.
Signing off.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Mr. Moroz, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I want to speak to two orders, the one on the salt shed and the one on Memorial Hall. One thing they have in common is that a lot of the issues with both buildings, frankly, appear to be that they really haven't been maintained and had small repairs done to them for a long period of time. We've seen this with a number of the issues with the fire station, with other buildings in town, that for some reason we let things just go until a time when we say we need a huge bond to rebuild everything. Now, we know that Memorial Hall's been leaking for years. Back in the late 1990s, though, we were told at these same city council meetings that if we put all the money into Memorial Hall that we were putting in then, it was going to protect the envelope of the building, and it was going to be, you know, in wonderful shape for years and years and years and years to come. It was distressing to see the pictures of the windows up there on the top of Memorial Hall and in such state of disrepair. You know, and I respect that it's a historic building, but it appears to me that it's not worth spending $3,000 a window for 86 windows, more than $250,000 to quote restore windows that really aren't ever going to perform well and aren't going to be they won't sustain well over time. There are new windows that can look identical to that can function well and be much more energy saving and be much more impervious to the elements than trying to restore those windows. Other things up there in the Memorial Hall, the roof, the split in the roof, that's something that anybody could go up there, a maintenance person from DPW could go up there and in 15 minutes could patch the split. The fact that we're saying we need a new roof because nobody's maintained a few splits or seams or cracks, you know, for an engineer to have to go up there and see that there's a gap that needs caulking in there, a maintenance person can do that. I think that even if we invest all this money, we need to have a maintenance protocol established for city buildings. We've seen too many buildings fall apart to the point where they need replacement or major repair just because they haven't been maintained. I want to go to the salt shed now. I listened carefully to your discussion the last time you talked about this, and I appreciate all the questions and input that many of the city councilors had on that issue. One thing is, I look at the pictures that were in the memo of that, I identify a few things that I've seen a number of things like this over the years. You know, when somebody shows a close-up of a split of a popped splice plate on a truss, you know, splice plates do pop off trusses. A lot of times they're actually due to when the place was first built, that the truss was mishandled at the time. They can pop. Obviously, people have sistered a couple of the trusses together over the years, but a close-up of a pop splice plate does not condemn a building. We can tell that building hasn't been maintained from the outside, nor has it needed a whole lot of maintenance. The Texture 111 siding has all been water compromised for years. It's not a structural element, though. It's just made to keep the wind and the rain from blowing through the building completely. All the T111 siding could be replaced for a matter of tens of thousands of dollars. The issue with the roof, I was surprised to hear what I thought I heard the city engineer say was that there was sheathing under the roof that was somehow, she didn't know the state of it. However, from the pictures that I see in the memo, it doesn't appear that there is a sheathing under the metal roofing. The metal roofing is actually attached to nailers that go across the trusses all the way. Where I'm going with this is I don't think we need to be spending $1.4 million to replace a shed, nor, and I appreciate the the value of somebody wanting to say, let's get the design work done first before we do everything. But I would love the city council to take a step back and get a structural engineer in there and evaluate the building. From, you know, again, somebody took a close-up of one post that's been knocked off the center of a pier that could certainly be put back and reattached and make it structurally sound. I obviously don't have access to that building to see inside it, but I would want somebody competent who knows the structure and knows trusses and engineered buildings like that to go in and look and say whether it is a structural problem or not with the building, or whether it's something that, again, just needs some small repairs that are done right and well to give that building a lot more time. It's unfortunate that the wind caught that roof and peeled it back some on the south side recently. But again, those are just roof panels that can be replaced. Even if we replace the whole roof, we're not approaching anywhere near the $1 million or $1.4 million. All that really needs to do is to keep the rain directly off of the salt. You know, and some of the rhetoric that was used by city staff at the meeting was a red flag to me for the chief financial officer to be making declarations about the structural integrity of the building. I felt was inappropriate. The same thing goes with the treasurer. That's not their realm. The city engineer, or actually the DPW superintendent at this point, the director, could have something, but the fact that she was talking about sheathing under the roofing when the pictures show the metal roofing from the inside, it says to me that she hasn't really evaluated the building. I would rather have the city spend, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 to have a structural engineer go in there and evaluate everything. Certainly there may be some work that needs to be done to shore up a couple things, or to reattach some things, or maybe even put some new roof panels in. But I'd hate to see us go and jump to making a design for a whole new building that we may not need. And I expect that, you know, obviously I have to qualify that I haven't inspected the building myself, but it looks to me that, you know, probably for well under $100,000, we could have a building that functions as well as it always does. The wood inside does not appear rotted. It doesn't look like there's been water getting in there for years and years doing anything to the trusses. They look intact. I really think that so many things that we can spend money on. To spend money on a salt shed that all it has to do is cover some salt, and the wind can blow through there, the rain can go around the sides. You know, nobody's even bothered to paint it in all these years, but yet it still stands up as a structure. I would really like to see it evaluated by a structural engineer before you go and apply any significant money to that. I hope that I'm not too late in the process about this. I do appreciate all the input people had. You know, when I think it was Councilor Thomas the other night was talking about the DCR. Well, Mass Highways does lots of salt sheds. There's one, they're all over the place, and you can see them. And I believe that we should be able to get a competent salt shed if we're going to do a new one, even for well under the kind of money that the city was talking about. So I really want to close up and say that we need to find a way for the DPW, whether they do it themselves or contract it out, to perform inspections, maintenance, and repair to buildings before we just let them neglect. I mean, I've watched inside at Melrose Symphony concerts, all the stains on the walls and that come in there from the water leaking. I've always assumed that somebody's been on top of that, taking care of it. And when an engineer goes up there and takes pictures of things that are just simple to fix, that's unfortunate. We've had degradation of the building that we didn't need to have happen. The fire station a few years ago, when we had all the pictures of what the engineer took, again, we saw simple fixes that nobody ever did. We saw that there was, you know, some metal that had peeled off of the hips of the roof that nobody bothered to replace. So of course, water was going to get in there between the slate and come down in. I just feel like we have to, even if we invest money in these buildings, the Memorial Hall, the money here now, and replacing a salt shed, that the city council needs to make certain that somewhere in the city, there's a mechanism for people to continuously evaluate, inspect, maintain, repair buildings, because too many times I've seen, and I've seen it with the schools. I saw it at the Winthrop School with work that had to get done there. I saw it in other schools as well, that we simply neglect something and then go and say, oh, let's just buy a new project and do the whole thing over. So I look forward to hearing your discussions about this tonight, and I do want to, again, thank all the city councilors for their questions and attention to the issues in the salt shed that we heard the other night. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk? Oh, you're on mute.
Is there anyone else in the room as an attendee that wishes to speak to items on the agenda? All right, I don't have anybody else.
I see someone.
You do? Oh, you're right, excuse me. I have Ruth Ann, I'm gonna make her, here she comes. Thank you, Councilor McNaught.
My pleasure.
Ruth Ann,
Yes.
can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
You all hear her?
Yep, the floor is yours, Ruth Ann.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm with Melrose Youth Ballet, and Melrose Youth Ballet, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, has held all of our Nutcracker performances at Memorial Hall since our inception 25 years ago. We feel so fortunate to have such an historically significant building with such beautiful Victorian charm in which to perform our ballet. Over the years, the improvements that have been made to the heating and air conditioning systems, the sound system, and the lighting have all been beneficial to our experience. But we also recognize that the hall is in need of far more improvements. The ceilings and walls in all parts of the building, including the dressing rooms, are in obvious poor condition and warrant attention. During rainstorms, water often comes into the building under the back doors. We do commend the management and the staff for their constant efforts to rise above these issues and to help us keep the shows running smoothly. We support the City of Melrose's efforts to bring Memorial Hall back to the beauty it had when it first opened. We consider Memorial Hall our Nutcracker home. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councilor McNaught, anybody else in the queue? Madam Clerk?
I do not.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is. Joan Monju, one moment. Joan?
Hello.
All right.
Hi, Joan, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you. My
Great.
name is Joan Ford Monjo, and I'm the president of the all-volunteer organization Friends of Melrose Memorial Hall. I come before you tonight to ask you to support the $2.3 million bond request needed to repair the exterior of our iconic hall. The hall, as you know, is the literal and figurative heart of the city, hosting hundreds of events and tens of thousands of visitors each year. Built in 1912 as a tribute to the city's soldiers and sailors, the exterior of the building is in need of serious repairs. The report produced by Russo Bar Associates details the need for the substantial work needed, including masonry as well as roof and windows. The role of the Friends of Melrose Memorial Hall is to increase awareness of the building and to raise funds targeted toward the repair and restoration of the interior historical artifacts and artistic elements. We have had overwhelming interest from the public in the work done by the Friends, as indicated by the attendance at our events and the funds we've raised already. Without significant repairs to the exterior of the hall, the interior projects planned and prioritized in conjunction with the hall's executive director and the board of trustees will be useless. Thank you for listening to me this evening.
Thank you. Madam Clerk? See anybody else with their hand up?
I do not. Last call. I think we're good.
So I'll entertain a motion to close public comment.
Motion to close public comment.
Second.
Motion to close public comment by Councilor Stewart, seconded by President Gregoritis. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Yes. Yes.
Councilor Trementozzi.
Yes.
Councilor McMaster.
Yes.
Councilor McNaught.
Yes.
Councilor Eccles.
Yes.
Councilor Garapay.
Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
President Gregoritis. Chair Sinella,
Yes.
11 yes.
All right. Well, we have a full agenda tonight, and I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. We also have our budget season approaching, and just wanted to remind everybody on Rule 13. Within Rule 13, it says no member shall occupy more than 5 minutes in total while speaking on any question where this debate is unlimited. There are obviously 2 chances to go, total of 10 minutes. So if you could please just keep an eye on the time and keep it within the 10 minutes. First order this evening before us is order 2020-69, authorizing a bond in the amount of $2,311,205 for the building repairs to Memorial Hall. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules. I believe we have
Motion to suspend the rules.
motion to suspend the rules by Councilor McNaught, seconded by Councilor Eccles. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Vice Chair Migliarelli,
Yes.
Councilor Tramontosi,
Yes.
Councilor McMaster,
Yes.
Councilor McNaught,
Yes.
Councilor Eccles,
Yes.
Councilor Garapay,
Yes.
Councilor Stewart,
Yes.
Councilor Thomas,
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin,
Yes.
President Gregoritis,
Yes.
Chair Sinella,
Yes.
11 yes. I'm going to make Denise Gaffey a panelist at this time. There she is. Denise, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can, and we can see you.
Oh, fantastic.
Denise, thank you for coming this evening.
You're welcome.
Like to kick us off?
Absolutely. So I'm pleased to be here tonight and to speak about the order in front of you regarding the bond request from Memorial Hall. That funding request comes out of a study that was performed in 2019 and was completed and resulted in a report dated November 18th, 2019, which I believe is attached to the order, and I hope you've all had a chance to review it. The project itself was initiated by an earmark grant that the city received back in early 2019. We received an earmark, and I was asked to assist Kathy Piggott-Broder with the implementation of this project. The earmark itself was focused on, sort of generally focused on restoration work at Memorial Hall. So my first order my first step was to meet with Kathy and with the Board of Trustees and just to confirm how what they thought was the most important way to spend that money and the most important project. It's really obvious that water infiltration is a critical concern in the building. So I expected that they would agree that performing a feasibility study or a building envelope study would be the highest priority. So that is what I went and embarked on. I hired an engineering company who specializes in this type of work, Russo Bar Associates, and proceeded to work with them over several months through the course of 2019. They came out to the building on many occasions. That team did a very thorough review. I think you would agree, based on the study, they did a pretty thorough review of all of the exterior elements of the building and put together this narrative and cost estimate of what it would cost to restore or make the building weather tight. And basically we're talking about roofing, flashing, masonry repointing, and window restoration. Those are sort of the key elements to this scope. And so the study was completed in November of 2019. It was presented to the Board of Trustees in November of 2019. And it was also, it became part of the capital improvement program, which was ongoing at that time. We were doing a comprehensive process citywide, as many of you are aware, looking at all of the city's capital needs, and Memorial Hall and this particular project was viewed as a very important priority project by the CIP committee and ranked very highly and is one of the top 10 projects. So that's sort of how we got to where we are today. I think Mayor Broder agreed that it was important to take the initiative to implement these repairs at this time. And obviously it would be the most prudent thing to do to seal up the exterior of the building before any further investment is made in the interior. And there's quite a bit of need in the interior as well. So it makes sense to do this project first. And I think that's pretty much my overview. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Councilor Garape?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Gaffney, for being here. Just have a couple questions. If this is approved tonight, when would it go out to bid? When do you think the project would start, and would it be completed by the winter?
I'm not exactly sure how long the completion date will take, to be honest with you. I have to, there are a few steps I need to take. I would have sit with the Board of Trustees and just talk through a schedule that works with their, with the events that are planned there. I mean, we're in a funny place right now, obviously, because the building, and that could work to our advantage because currently the building is closed. And so I think my interest would be to start it right away and try to move as quickly as we can to try to take advantage of the fact that this currently, most of the programming has been suspended. So that would be my intention, would be to meet with the trustees, lay out a schedule. We would have to, there are a couple of things we'd have to do. We would have to go through a selection process to hire an engineer and a preservation architect. And that would be the first step. And then to fully develop the design plans and develop construction documents in order to take this out to bid. So it's there's quite a few steps ahead. I think it would be somewhat ambitious to try to complete this by the end of this year.
Okay. With regards to, we received a couple emails regarding the Historical District Commission, and this project have to go in front of the Historical District Commission? And would that be on that? Would we get that on the docket so that starts moving? Can we start working that both together if that is the process?
Yeah, so the building itself is in the historic district, so correct. It would require a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic District Commission. We would not go in front of the commission until we had developed plans. I mean, they want to see exactly what the exterior modifications and measures are going to be, and so that's we couldn't do that right away, nor would that be of any service to anybody. But that would be built into the process, into the design phase as well, for sure. There's also, the building itself is on the National Register, and there's a preservation restriction on the building. So we would be consulting with Mass Historic Commission. They are required to review the plans. And as part of that consultation, they generally loop in the local historical commission. I did see an email that was sent earlier to the board about that question, and I was a little surprised by that, and frankly a little bothered, but that the commission, or at least the chair of commission, would initiate a correspondence with Mass Historic right now because it's very premature. We don't even have the funding in place. So I mean, I don't know, it kind of gives the impression that we may not know that we need that we have a preservation restriction on this building, and that's certainly not the case. I've managed at least four projects on this building over the last 20 years, and I'm well aware of the preservation restriction on the building. We've always consulted with Mass Historical Commission, and so I would just say it's too early in the process to do that now, and I just kind of question why that outreach was taken at this point, especially when there are members of the commission who are well aware that we've worked with them in the past to consult on projects. So
I did notice on the bid, it's we got 1.807205, and the appropriation is 2.3 2.311205, a difference of about 504,000. Is that just a contingency, or you can
So
just
those are
explain a
soft
little bit about the
costs.
difference? Yeah.
Yeah, those are soft costs that are not built into the construction costs. The construction estimate, the estimate in the document, the study is just for construction. If you read the narrative, there is some mention, and I think it's even asked, there's even an asterisk on the estimate itself, but there is some mention of the fact that the estimate here does not include soft costs, which are further design, project management. We would have to hire a project manager. We're actually obligated by statute because of the dollar amount to hire a project manager, which I think is good. It's a good thing to do anyway. But we have, obviously design, project management, and other contingency, escalation cost. So I think we have factored in about 25% for that, which is sort of the industry standard at this stage. Since this is a very rough and early estimate, a feasibility estimate is quite preliminary.
Counselor Garrett Pay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I believe the mayor's in queue for questions as well. I don't mean to interrupt your flow. I'm just going to bring him in. Just I don't want you to be startled by the adding him as a panelist.
I'm going to finish up.
No, go right ahead.
Memorial Hall, to me, it's a major piece of fabric in our community. I believe it is an integral part of the business community, drawing people downtown who patronize our local shops and businesses. Unfortunately, due to the financial constraints over the years, the upkeep on the building has been neglected. By allowing the deterioration of this building to continue, the potential damage caused inside, I feel, may not be repairable. So I believe starting this process, we'll be able to get it to the point where we have provided a product for Kathy Pickett-Broda to be able to make this building self-sustainable. We've not been able to do that, and I think we owe it to Kathy to be able to give her a product that she can work with and make this building self-sustainable, so it doesn't continue to drain on our budget. So I'll be supporting this order.
Thank you. Mayor Broder?
Hello again, everyone. I very much appreciate the time. I really can't say it better than the folks with obviously I disagree with what Mr. Moreau said, but I appreciate the comments of the others supporting both the thoughtfulness of the process, the fact that engineers have been consulted, and in particular the value and the symbolism, all of which is so important to our community, to our veterans community in particular, into our economy. It's been said already, but Memorial Hall really is the anchor of our downtown, and we can never forget that. We have to take, I think, a long view as to regarding the importance of that. And this is an investment that I am confident will pay off. And when I think of some of the things that have gone on there, we know about certainly our premier tenant, the Melrose Symphony, Academia, many school events, wrestling, both pro and amateur, has been housed at Memorial Hall, boxing, intergenerational prom, you name it. It really is from a place that when I was a kid was definitely something of an afterthought and not particularly aggressively used, has really grown into something that it is our obligation to maintain. And it's important to me, it's important to the community. Everyone has their story about Memorial Hall. I think in particular about after 9/11, it's where the community gathered. I was not home, I was stuck out and took a bit to get home. But that was, knowing that was the place, I knew that folks were going there and gathering there. That's an incredible thing. And the idea that it's something unique to our community that we can preserve and enhance is very, very important to all of us, I think. So I appreciate the support. I also want to note that, if I can pull it up here, the president of the symphony was in the queue, but missed her opportunity to speak for whatever reason. She did shoot me an email asking me to pass along that the Melrose Symphony is honored to be the orchestra in residence for 102 years at Memorial Hall, and that we support all efforts to maintain this historic treasure, and that they very much look forward to performing again soon and well into the future at Memorial Hall. As they are so much identified with Memorial Hall, I did want to make sure that folks knew that they were stepping forward with their support. Thank you all again very much.
Thank you, Mayor Broder. Did I miss anybody? Councilor McNaught?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here tonight, Ms. Gaffey, and thank you, Mayor Broder, for your words as well. I'll be brief. I will essentially say that I agree with what Councilor Garapay said at the end in his summation. I think it's time that we get Memorial Hall to a place where we're proud to bring people in there. And I say that very delicately because I know how proud we all are of Memorial Hall, and we understand its historic significance. We've heard the public speak here tonight, and I know I haven't been on the council very long, but I've never seen a flurry of emails like we got to support this order, especially over today. It took a long time to get through them, but the wide array of businesses that rent Memorial Hall and bring so much business and a vibrant atmosphere to downtown Melrose is astonishing. From dance recitals to, as the mayor said, boxing matches to weddings to, I'm there a few times a year and I can't even remember why, but every time I go in, I think, God, it'd be really nice if we fix this place up. So I am in support of fixing the envelope and in doing it with professional opinions. I do understand it's a significant amount of money during a time period where things are a little shaky, but I believe that we can handle it. I would raise one thing that Mr. Moreau said, and I'm sure it's crossed many of our minds, and that is preventative maintenance. I don't mention this just for Memorial Hall. I mention it for any real project that we're going to take on for buildings within the city. So I guess that would be just, it's not a put you on the spot question, Ms. Gaffney, for Memorial Hall, so to speak, but can we begin to build in preventative maintenance plans with projects like this? And is it possible to do something generally so that we can build something in for Memorial Hall and all projects going forward?
I share your concern about that. I think it's a very legitimate, extremely legitimate comment. And I think that is something we can be more mindful of when we're doing this project. I mean, obviously we always have warranties with our work, but we could maybe, we may be in the position, if the budget warrants, to maybe beef up our warranties and allow for some extra scrutiny and review, building it in, for years after. But I think we can certainly put together more explicit types of instructions on how to maintain the work that gets done. I think that's an excellent idea.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Councilor Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you, Ms. Gaffey, for being here. Mayor Broder, thank you for being here. Russo Bar and Associates, they did a great job with this survey. Will you take the scope of this survey and then put this out to bid to other contractors?
I'm afraid I can't do that. By statute, I have to hire, I have to use the designer selection law to hire an engineer. This scope of work did not exceed the threshold for that process. So I was able to hire Russo Bar by contacting 3 different firms and getting, putting out a written scope. But and they ended up being fantastic. So I'm certainly hoping they will bid on it, and they'll be very competitive if they do. But I do have to do a selection process. And I mean, as part of that process too, it's now a more expansive project. We would have them team. The engineer would probably be the lead because of, well, actually I have to think about it. most likely the engineer would be a lead, but we would have a preservation architect as part of the team also, which is how we approached the HVAC project that we did 10 years ago and other projects. So so there'll be more members to the team than just the envelope engineer.
And as Councilor Garapi noted, there is about, $600,000 or $700,000 in soft money, as you called it. Would that historical architect be part of that soft money?
Yeah, that's going to be built into the designer's fee, which is part of the soft costs.
And if Russo and Barr did not bid this project, I think there are other area engineers that could take this on.
I think it's a pretty exciting project. So yeah, I do. I mean, I'm a little, I have to say, I'm not, I'm a little unclear what the climate is like right now with COVID-19, but I believe there'll be, nonetheless, I mean, I think there'll be a lot of interest in this project.
And like Councilor McNaught said, I haven't been on the board long either, but there was a flurry, dozens of people in favor of this reaching out via email. I wanted to thank veterans Eric Denoto and Scott Forbes for speaking tonight in favor of Memorial Hall. It is a huge part of our community. As a lifelong Melrosian, I've seen firsthand that Memorial Hall is part of the fabric of Melrose. As a child that took part on the annual Halloween parade inside the Memorial Hall back in the day in the late 70s and early 80s. I've seen my kids, go through their moving on ceremonies at Memorial Hall for 5th grade. I've seen the state champion Melrose High School wrestling team wrestle in the brawl in the hall against Wakefield the last few years. But Memorial Hall is in need of repairs, renovation, and modernization. Updates and repairs to the exterior of the building will allow, like you said, to get into the interior of Memorial Hall. The interior of Memorial Hall, do we have any ideas of what the costs may be to improve the interior, including the guard room?
I have not been involved in any assessments at this stage for that. I know that the Friends group has been very actively trying to fundraise, and that's part of their goal is to fundraise for some of the interior work.
No, I definitely think an investment in Memorial Hall is an investment in our community. So I will be voting in favor of this as well. Thank you.
Councilor Eccles?
Thank you, Ms. Gaffey and Mayor Britton for being here tonight. So a few of my questions did have to do with kind of like a long-term plan for renovating the interior of Memorial Hall, but Councilor Thomas asked, and it seems like those discussions haven't quite yet started. Is that right?
Well, I was agreeing with him that I think that's really important that becomes a priority, that we have those discussions, and that we would try to build into the project. We would certainly end up at the end of the project, we can end up with a robust sort of set of instructions on maintenance. But I think the city also just needs to make sure, the staff is in place to follow through on those.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that the most compelling reason for moving this forward personally is that it's not prudent to spend any money on the interior until we can fix up the exterior. And then I just have one more question is based on your experience with the other projects you worked with, do you see anything that could be maybe a red flag as part of this project with the Mass Historic Commission or any of the preservation groups as far as what could cause an issue?
Not at all. I'm sure they're going to be really excited that the city, Mass Historical Commission will be very excited that the city is making this investment. No question about it. They're all about preserving the building, and that is the mission of this project. And no, I don't think we're not really proposing any radical alterations either, really. It's kind of like a maintenance project, except it's more than that. I think but there's not a lot that's going to be controversial. I guess I'll just put it that way. I can't imagine there's anything all that controversial. I think when we were doing the HVAC project in 2008, that was a little bit more, that one was a very sensitive project because we were putting events into the interior, and we had to be very considerate about where we were replacing them and making them as, not as obtrusive as we could. And I don't see quite the same level of concern about these exterior repairs. But certainly we'll be going through that process.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. So obviously, Ms. Caffey has more experience than just about anyone, perhaps in the history of the building in certain respects, given the number of projects that have gone there. And back in the day, I was an attorney in the Secretary of State's office, not working directly with Mass Historic, but on occasion having to interact with them for various reasons. The same is true with various things during the time I was state representative. And my sense of them is absolutely that they get excited about projects like this, that communities are looking to preserve and protect these kind of resources. I can tell you if we spoke to them way back in the day when, quite frankly, the city was considering closing or severely limiting activity at Memorial Hall, they would have been very disappointed. They like to see this kind of effort, and I expect that we will certainly, as we have in the past, before my administration, work closely with them to make sure we're doing the right thing, because in this case, the right thing is also the most productive thing for the hall and the best thing for the community.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm excited to echo my previous counselors and many of the people who wrote to us and spoke in public comment and plan to support this order. Thank you.
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Gaffey, for being here tonight. I had a question sort of piggybacking off of what Councilor Garapi asked about timing. So it's a little bit different now in that we're not having events in Memorial Hall, but if we were, how would this impact events? And could you speak a little bit more to how potentially we could take advantage of this time not having events? I mean, we don't want to think about the worst case scenario of how long that might be, but just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
So yeah, I think the fact that there are currently, that the event schedule has been sort of put aside for the time being speaks to our interest in doing this or getting the project going right away. I think if we can take advantage of that, that's obviously better. If we can, if we're not having to work around events, it just makes things a little bit easier. I'm not terribly concerned about this project and working around events, because most of the work is exterior, and I think it can be done. I mean, I think it would require coordination. I mean, we've done it before with other projects in the building, and I think it's just a matter of having constant communication with Caffey and with the Board of Trustees, and just making sure we're coordinating with them and mindful of their events. We would build certain events. We could build into the schedule that certain events, if we couldn't be doing any work in the building during them, I mean, that can all be kind of laid out up front. But I think a lot of this work can be done without major disruptions.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll just echo what my other counselors said. I was impressed by the number of emails that we've received in support of this project, and I'll be voting and supporting it as well.
Councilor McMaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Ms. Gaffey. Good evening, Mayor Broder. I had a question about the history of repairs over time. Primarily, when is the last time that the city made a significant investment on the outside of the building, structurally speaking?
So yeah, the last major capital investment in the building that I was involved in was in 2008, but that was the HVAC project. That was including air conditioning into the building for the first time, and completely upgrading the heating system. And there were obviously some exterior elements associated with that, but it wasn't sort of an envelope type project. And then there were a series of projects in the mid to late 90s that involved exterior work, that involved selective masonry. it was selective masonry pointing. There wasn't budget to do like the whole building, but selective portions. And there were some windows that were selectively restored. Again, not all of the windows were restored. The roof was replaced in the late 90s, so that has not lasted for as long as I would certainly like to see, to be honest with you. But the other projects were selective restoration work. And a couple of them were related to involved grant funding that the city obtained in the 90s from the Mass Preservation Projects Fund, which is also out of the Secretary of State's office, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you. And the reason I ask that is I think it illuminates two things. The first is the age of the building, 1912. That's put it in perspective. That's the same year that Fenway Park was built, and we know the number of the investments that have been made to the ballpark over the years, both to the outside and to the inside. So I think it does demonstrate the need to make improvements when we need to. I think to Mr. Morose's point, it also does demonstrate the idea of having some sort of a building maintenance plan. And I did bring this up with respect to the fire apparatus. Same thing, that when we make these investments, when we vote on the bond, we should be looking ahead to having these types of plans. So I am compelled, to support this because I think it's needed. I would just like to see us look to work on a plan proactively to mitigate the impacts that weather may have on the building over time, and potential borrowing again in the future, or major impacts that we might be able to address short of a major investment. The other question that I had is, did it come up at all during this process that, and I heard Ms. Munjo talk about the importance of having work done to the outside of the building so that it can begin to do the work as a group that it's looking to do internally to preserve the building. Has there been conversations about not doing this work potentially impacting our ability to host events at Memorial Hall, and which may impact our ability to generate revenue?
I think anything I could say to that would be anecdotal, but I think, certainly if you're in the GAR hall, it's pretty apparent that that there's a lot of that there's been a lot of deterioration, and it's really not it doesn't reflect well on the building. And I think if you're renting space for good money and people have options, then they're going to consider other venues. I think it just makes sense.
And my final question is, at one time, I believe we had historical artifacts that were stored in the basement of the building. They're not in a climate controlled setting right now. My guess is they're still there. Is there any belief that they're no longer there? Because I think that's another consideration in terms of doing the work to the outside of the building, is ensuring that those important historical artifacts are in a building where perhaps we can do the type of work internally to put them in a climate controlled environment, unless there's some other plan for them, and unless they've already been removed. But I'm not aware that they have.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not exactly sure where any types of artifacts like that are being stored.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that I missed? I don't think I saw anyone else's hands go up. What is the will of the committee?
Motion to recommend for passage.
Second.
Motion to recommend for passage to the full board by Councilor Eccles, seconded by Councilor Tramitozzi. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Councilor Tramitozzi.
Yes.
Councilor McMaster.
Yes.
Councilor McNaught.
Yes.
Councilor Eccles.
Yes.
Councilor Garapay.
Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
President Gregoritis.
Yes.
Chairman Sinella,
Yes.
11 yes.
Next up is our divided order 2020-70, which was an appropriation for $579,000 from free cash. This was in conjunction with, we had 4 orders, 3 of which were held in committee for department, some of which equipment drainage. Discussion, I don't know if Mayor Broder, did you want to speak to any of these? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, there you go. Y'all still hear me? Sure. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I want to put this in a little bit of context for you. So the city started on, these are going to be very rough numbers. The city started out with roughly $5 million in certified free cash. And as a general proposition, it is incumbent upon the city through the council to dispose of that money. I don't mean dispose of in the bad way, but allocate it before the end of the fiscal year. And you all know that we have very significant capital needs of various sizes throughout the city, and that we were hoping to, in a very structured way, put the vast majority of this money towards those needs following the CIP. And when we introduced this first kind of tranche, if you will, this first allocation, it was with the understanding, or expressed to some, if not all of you, that there was more to come. And then, you know, the wheels kind of came off the cart with COVID and the significant threat to both, you know, certain local revenue streams and certainly really putting our state aid in significant jeopardy. So that caused us to kind of call a halt to some of the things. We picked out what we thought was the most pressing, and asked you to kind of hold these in abeyance, if you will. These are all still, I think, very, very important needs. But I want to put it in the context of this fiscal problem and in the context of all the free cash. So what we are planning to propose to the council in fairly short order is to essentially take half the free cash, around $2.5 million, and put it in various stabilization or reserve funds, one of which I think is before you tonight, as a hedge against possible disruptions in our cash flow, in our funding, in our revenue in the next fiscal year and potentially beyond. We all have seen, I've shared with you guys the revenue forecasts that are kind of all over the map. There was a great deal of uncertainty around the how the state is going to come in. We plan to give you a budget that is very conservative in terms of what we expect for state aid, but we still want to build that hedge. So that would essentially reduce free cash from 5 million to 2.5 if you in your wisdom decide to support that plan. That leaves roughly 2.5, a chunk of which you've already about $850,000 worth. You have already approved. What is before you right now is about a little shy of 580, and that would leave, you know, roughly $1 million left for us to allocate with additional orders down to you before the end of the fiscal year. So that is kind of the fiscal context of where we're at. We think that is a prudent way to go, putting those reserves in place, as opposed to making some much needed capital investment, because the future is unsecure right now. But that is a significant hedge, and I do think we have the capacity to do these things that are all needed. There are folks prepared to defend them, and certainly if you in your wisdom want to hold the order for a brief amount of time before moving forward, after hearing the information tonight, I would certainly understand where you're coming from. Just being mindful that it is important to act on free cash before the end of the year. And I think, prudently in advance of the end of the year would probably is certainly what I would recommend. So with that as kind of a pretext, I know that there are members of the administration ready to discuss various parts of the order with you. We welcome that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't see anybody. Anybody have any questions? No, we have Elena in queue.
I'm going to bring in Elena, the Director of Public Works. And we have the Director of IT. Both brought into the room. Elena, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Neil, can you hear us? Okay.
You guys want to, Elena, do you want to go first, speak to any of the orders?
Sure.
Order we have?
Yeah, so I'm going to be speaking on three of the items: the generator, the school security, and I believe the third one was the Lebanon and Sylvan drainage. But Kristen, can you clarify? Are we discussing all three of those tonight?
There's 4 items on the table. It's exactly what you said. The generator, the door, school security, door locks, Sylvan Street, Lebanon Street, and additional school security, middle school security.
The Neil, okay, and the fourth one is the one that Neil will be speaking to. So I will start off with the generator. So we have been in desperate need of a generator for City Hall for some time now. It really came to light a couple of years ago when we had a power outage at City Hall. And I believe it was the first power outage after Neil had started as the IT director. And a number of issues were brought to light that there were some sort of temporary fixes that the prior IT department and DPW administration had used to address when City Hall loses power, but they were very haphazard and not a real solution to this problem. So the issue at City Hall is that when the power goes out, the server room in City Hall loses all power, and the equipment in that server room runs the communications for the police department, the fire department, the majority of our school buildings, and City Hall itself. So all of those buildings lose all phone communications. They lose email, internet connectivity, a number of functions. Neil, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we lose the phone systems. Regarding the phone system, we're in the midst of installing a new phone system, and because of the lack of consistent power for the City Hall, we've had to work around that. So we've spent extra money now. Now we're spending extra money trying to work around the problem of not having a generator at City Hall. Additionally, if we had a long-term outage, which is very possible, we would lose our ability to function on Munis as well. So Munis is a server that runs in a server, well, a bunch of servers that run in that server room, and we would lose access to that. We would lose our email. I think Elena mentioned that. Right now, we're losing phones to public safety and City Hall because we run all those phones back and forth. We're also the distribution center for the schools. So everything in the city goes through that server room, including the phones at the schools. So we would lose phones. Well, we would lose phones at 6 of the school buildings, and we would lose routing. So no internet, no email for the schools. I mean, everything would be shut down. So
It's kind of the crux of the entire system.
So this project was identified as an extremely high priority. It was named as the #1 priority in the CIP process. It was also named as the #1 priority in our natural hazard mitigation planning that we did last year to qualify for FEMA funds. And it was the #1 priority identified in our state municipal vulnerability preparedness program, which was dealing with climate resiliency. So the natural hazards mitigation plan deals with current, future natural hazards, everything under the sun from hurricanes, tornadoes, snowstorms. And then the vulnerability preparedness it takes that a step further and deals with climate resiliency and changes that could happen in the future. And in both of those processes, as well as the CIP, this was identified as the city's #1 priority. So we have applied for multiple grants for this generator. We've not been successful. It's very, very difficult to get generators funded because they're not a lot of these funding opportunities. You get extra points for having nature-based solutions and things, green infrastructure, things that are much more fun to fund and a little more modern in today's thinking. But unfortunately, backup power sometimes is still just what's necessary to solve a problem. And so our latest grant application is what's called a pre-disaster mitigation grant with FEMA. So this is the second time that I've submitted this project to FEMA and the third time that it's been submitted in the last decade or so to FEMA. And this time around, they've said that we have a very good likelihood of receiving the grant funds, but they strongly encouraged us to initiate the design now because we have a 25% match on the grant funds. The total grant or the total project cost, just pull it up here, including our contribution, is estimated at $514,000. And so by doing the design now, we would be able to have those design costs. If we get the grant, they count as our match. So there's no loss of funds. And procuring the design services and starting that design right now makes it so that they see that we're very serious about initiating this project, and it becomes more of a shovel-ready project when the time comes for them to decide on the grant, which is December. So between now and December, we would hope to get through the majority of that design process. We would have documents all ready to go out to bid for construction. And then when FEMA hopefully decides to give us the money, we fill out some forms that allow us to count the $105,000 that we would expend on the design as our match. And then they would give us the other 3/4 of the funding at that time. So we would have basically no capital outlay for the construction portion of the project if the grant is approved.
If I could just, because I think it's important. This is another one of those items, another of which you'll be discussing a little bit in a few minutes, or hopefully a few minutes, that is not interesting. It is not, no one goes, oh, wow, you bought a generator. That's awesome. But every crisis teaches you a little bit of something. And what I've learned from this is in the need to go remote and kind of restructure communications. We tried to do that with our phone system, and we had some significant struggles because our phone system is ancient. It is completely outmoded. It doesn't work for the modern environment that we need it to work in. Happily, the timing was a little bit off. We are halfway through the rollout of fixing that because the city made some wise investments and Neil is leading that installation. We just didn't get it done before we had to close City Hall. I respectfully suggest we don't want to get to the point where that crisis hits where we go, oh man, I wish we followed through on that generator. No one no one is going to pat you on the back for buying a generator. It's not going to be, well, maybe it will be on the front page of the paper. We'll see how it goes. But it is, as Ms. Proicasella said, it was identified as our #1 need. And it is something that we need, because when we face down whatever the next challenge is, knowing that we've done this, it will be important to us, important to our constituents. I appreciate the consideration.
One other item I just want to add is that one of the exceptions that FEMA uses is the no notice event. And I had some lengthy conversations with MEMA about our lack of a generator and what that means in this no notice event, which is, let's say, a hurricane or hurricane, we probably know, a tornado that comes through and takes out power and we're down for a week. This is the type of event that we might not be expecting. We might be expecting just a thunderstorm one day. Kids are in school, buildings are packed with children. A tornado rips through, takes out power in City Hall, and suddenly all the phone lines to those schools that are on this system are no longer available. And you have parents trying to call and find out, are my kids okay? Do we have to come pick them up? You know, what do we need to do next? And to lose communications, to lose email, and to lose phones in a situation like that is a huge problem. So that was one of the areas where MEMA really saw this as a high need, was in those no notice events. And then the other thing is, you know, that the long-term prolonged outage, which could occur from a hurricane or something, an event like that. We always think that that's just not going to happen just because it hasn't happened. But here we find ourselves today in a situation that we probably also never thought was going to happen. And, you know, it just reiterates the need to plan for these major events before they happen so that we're not trying to figure things out on the fly in the midst of a crisis.
If I may just add one additional thing, the purpose behind the state with their MVP grant process was to get communities thinking about climate change and the outcomes from climate change with an outlook over the next 20 to 30 years, or even shorter time span. And they do predict a real increase in the number of natural disasters as a result of climate change. So they're trying to get communities to think about that. And that is one of the things that we're thinking about and are concerned about.
So Kristen, should I move directly into the school security, the doors, or should we do all four? Or?
So last go around, Councilor Trementozzi, I believe we went item by item at the end, correct?
We did.
We did. Okay, so go ahead, Elena, if that's the will of the council.
Go ahead, Elena.
All right.
Yeah.
So the next one is the 300,000 for school doors. This project was born out of when Ann Wade was here as the assistant director in DPW and facilities manager. In working with the school principals and with the superintendent, she had identified a number of needs that totaled well over 300,000. She had indicated to me that it would be well over $1 million to resolve the door problems that we have at our schools. But she felt that with a $300,000 allocation, we could handle the worst issues and get things better prepared for modern security, modern technology, and the types of incidents that we obviously don't want to think about, but you know, active shooters and school, someone entering a school building who shouldn't be there. So the project would address issues with both external and interior doors, and it would not be specific to one particular school. We do have our brand new facilities manager starting on May 18th, Jay McNeil. I'm really excited for him to start. He has a lot of facilities background. He presently works at Harvard University and does facilities work there, manages both trade and custodial staff. And in interviewing him, he has a really strong focus on asset management, on preventative maintenance, tracking all of our assets. A lot of what was discussed by several people with regard to Memorial Hall, once you build something new, how do you do the preventative maintenance and stay on top of it and track it to ensure that you're not letting your facilities deteriorate at a high rate once they're built? So I envision that he will take these funds, if they're approved, and will help to identify what the biggest needs are. But these are the needs that I understand at this time. On exterior doors, we have a lot of doors that are just old and they've exceeded their life expectancy. We have some doors that we've had to retrofit in order to get the fob systems to work on those old doors, and they are very temperamental. They have problems frequently. We end up having to attend to them frequently. The Franklin ECC has large old doors that are very heavy. They're not ideal for pre-K and kindergarten students to try to push those doors open if there were to be an emergency where they were the ones trying to get themselves out of the building. I guess traditionally there have been a lot of instances where we've purchased these hollow metal doors that I was told were on the order of 13,000 for a set of doors. There are solid metal doors that are much more appropriate for the frequency of use at schools, because they're used so often by so many people all day long in and out, that the $13,000 model doesn't hold up the way the $22,000 solid doors hold up. And I guess at the middle school, even though that facility is less than a decade old, some of those doors are already failing because of just the frequency of their use. At the Roosevelt, we have doors that exit to the blacktop area that are corroded because of salt, because it's right next to an area that we do sand and salt in the winter for the students coming in. And so those have seen some significant corrosion and could be replaced. So those are the biggest needs on the exterior door end. And then on the interior door, a lot of the doors at a lot of the schools, it really addresses the issue of an intruder, and the ability to close and lock those doors. In some schools, we have doors that they swing out into the hallway, and they actually swing 180 degrees out. So if you picture someone getting into a building who shouldn't be there, and you're the teacher and you want to close that door and the person's in the hallway, you have to fully walk into the hallway, grab that door and close it in order to secure the door. We also have doors where the vision panel in the doors, the classroom doors, is far too large. They're supposed to be just a skinny little window where you can see out to see if somebody's there. We have doors that you could actually crack the window and put your hand in and unlock the door, which is again just not the modern security standards that new schools are built with. We do have some pricing to put on new doors for classroom doors, about $2,100 each. So in a school with about 30 classrooms, for about $70,000, we could do all the classroom doors in one school. We could pick the worst couple of schools and address them that way. I guess we've also been testing a lock system for classroom doors at the Hoover. It costs about $240 per door, and it allows the door to basically stay locked from the outside at all times, and the door just stays open. And the principals have a master key in case somebody gets locked out, but they always open from the inside. So it's a door that you can always get out in a fire emergency. But if you need to slam the door shut quick, it locks automatically, and then you can prevent an intruder. So those are the types of repairs that we're looking at. But my hope is that this first $300,000 would just get us the funds we need for the new facilities manager in his walkthroughs that we already have scheduled with the principals when he gets here, to identify, make a list of all the door needs, prioritize them, decide which ones we can fit into this budget, and then develop a plan from there to use this first $300,000 to attack those worst issues. And again, same with the generator. We'd rather do this now than when we're in an emergency situation and then retroactively saying, oh, I wish we could have planned for that. The Lebanon and Sylvan drainage project, I know I had presented once previously. So that is alleviating the flooding at Lebanon and Sylvan Streets. We have submitted a grant application to FEMA. They have required that we submit some additional information. We're in the process of pulling that together. That information is due at the end of or middle of June. And then we hope to hear relatively soon if we get that funding. That project is similar to the generator project in that we can initiate the design at any time. If we initiate the design now, it just puts us a little ahead of the game if we get the funding. And again, we can apply for those design funds to be applied as our as a portion of our match for that project. So that one is not as pressing as the generator, but at the same time, if we get the grant funding, then we are going to need to have the match money available in short order. So approving it now would just save us the trouble of coming back again if we get the funds. And then the fourth item is Neil's.
Neil, you're on mute.
Right. So the fourth item addresses the security from a door access, the electronic door access standpoint. We have the fobs that you hit the reader with the fob on the outside the door, and it opens the door, unlocks the door. We have those throughout the city and the schools. There was a system, a one-off system that was installed in the middle school at the time when the middle school was installed. It probably predates the other systems that were installed elsewhere in the city and schools. It's at this point, I think what was the school, middle school was 2007 it opened, I believe, 2000. So the system is incredibly old, the application, it's not secure. The door hardware, the reader hardware is outdated and not the highest encryption that we'd like. And then also the system is not compatible with the other system that's everywhere else. So we have to issue separate cards at the middle school versus the fobs that everybody else uses. So when teachers need to move in buildings, they need to get two different things, and we have to maintain two different systems. So in order to wrap that up into the same system where and what happens is when you try to maintain two different systems, you get a lot of, it becomes a security hazard just in the fact that have to maintain two different systems and things fall through the cracks. People will walk off with cards and they don't get eliminated because they've been eliminated from one system and not the other system, because the other system is being maintained by facilities and not IT. It's just, it also is not a centralized system so that we can see if, say, someone goes into a building and something happens, we can't really see what happens in that old system. It's so old. All of that stuff is logged on the system that is in the city. In the server room, which I didn't mention as one of the things that would go down in a power outage, is also this security system that's housed in the city hall. But we want to consolidate that system so they're all the same. We're operating from the same place, issuing fobs to people from the same place. That's basically the project. We need to add. We actually, because of some things that have, the way the building works and operates, we need to add a couple of card swipes in some areas. Some are broken, and there's also the connection between the two buildings is difficult where we're using both buildings and parts of both buildings for the high school and the middle school simultaneously, where people are moving between the two, don't have a credential.
Thank you. Let's open up for questions. Councilor Thomas.
Mr. Chairman, I just fill in a blank or stress something a little bit. We obviously have significant needs. The focus of this money, I just want to be clear, the priority would be on the school security piece. If you take a look at the CIP document, it mentions it a little bit more. happily, it has been a long time in the unfortunate modern history of our country where we haven't seen a school shooting in several months, which is, something of a record, unfortunately, in these times. But like with some of the other things we're talking about, we have to build that infrastructure to make sure we can be as safe as we can. And this is the priority for this money, is to make sure that we are comfortable about the level of security that we're providing, both to the buildings as a whole, but also to the individual classrooms.
Councilor Thomas, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Ellis and Mr. Ellis, thank you both for being here. Mayor Broder, thanks for continuing to be here. I guess this is for Neil Ellis. Mr. Ellis, do you have a UPS battery backup on your current server?
Yes.
How long does that UPS kick in for? And does that keep all the systems up for a short period of time, or can you explain what the UPS is?
Okay, so there are a couple of different UPSs, and they're, as you can imagine, they're in different places. So when, depending on the system that you're talking about, as far as it spreads out, say, switches, if you're talking about schools, say phones, is this in relation to the generator?
Well, no, obviously a UPS isn't going to be a replacement for a generator. I'm just trying to get an idea, and anyone listening at home, what you have for backup right now, and is it adequate or inadequate?
Well, the battery backup is adequate for battery backup, I guess I should say. So all of our network infrastructure, the switches are on battery backups. So, depending on the system, say like the wireless access points and phones in all the schools, those are powered by the switch, which is a piece of equipment that connects the computers and the servers and the phones. They're all powered by those items, so they're on battery backup, so those things will last for a little bit longer, depending on the draw of the equipment that's connected to it. At City Hall, for the servers, we have we installed just probably a year ago a very large UPS system that will carry a lot more than it had previously, and that we connect that to our most priority servers. Even with that on, in the draw that those have, it will go down very quickly. And another thing I should mention, in addition to the generator, in relation to the generator, is that when we lose power, even if we do keep the servers up, we have a serious issue because HVAC is not cooling the environment. So we can only let those servers run for so long without cooling anyway. So even if we could keep it going on a larger battery, we would have to shut it off manually or automatically if it overheats. So that's another thing we're working on, is trying to get another AC unit in the server room. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, thank you for that extra detail. As far as the doors at the schools, exterior doors, are all the doors at the schools that need to be ADA compliant, are they in compliance with the American Disability Act? You're on mute.
You're mute.
Mute, Elena.
Sorry, that's a great question. So since I've only been responsible for facilities since I became the director a month ago, I am not certain if all the doors are ADA compliant. I am certain that anything we've done recently has been done to code, but I really can't speak to some of the older buildings if those are all compliant.
So would this money for the doors, would that include bringing doors that are not ADA compliant into code?
Any new doors,
request.
if we were putting in any new doors, we would absolutely put in compliant doors. So I would imagine if something was out of compliance and we replaced it, it would now be in compliance.
Great, thank you for that. Interior doors, there are multiple different door lock sets. The most effective for schools, I think, would be classroom style. You know, it's kind of obvious to say classroom style, but those are only doors that, like you said, at Hoover School, they only lock from the inside. You can manually unlock them from a key. Now, are we trying to get them all the doors in the schools to be classroom style handle door locks?
That's my understanding of what the eventual goal would be. Like I said, this first 300,000 would only, do a portion of what needs to be done at any of the schools. But I would imagine that that we would probably start with the schools that have the most efficient doors and aim to replace the doors and the lock sets to be, whatever the modern standard was. And I understand that the Hoover was the example. We've been, I guess, piloting some, I think it was Oak Associates doors that that are that classroom style.
Great. And lastly, probably back to you, Neil. We're in a fob system. Are we going to stay with that fob system, or are we looking at a proximity card type?
The system that we have, actually, the proximity card, I'm not, this might be semantics, but the proximity card is actually an older style of reader. This is it's a different type of radio signal, but you can issue any number of styles of fob card. You can get the sticker that you can stick on to, it's like an RFID style. There are a number of different things. You can even upgrade to a phone app that does NFC to the reader. But anything that goes too far up, we would have to, swap out all of the readers for which we probably will have to do within, 10 years as they get older and the encryption is not as good as what the modern is, and that kind of thing. But yeah,
we want to bring the middle school into the same system that everyone else is on, right? And stay with that one system.
Yeah, in fact, the system at the middle school is a prox card reader system.
Okay.
So.
All right, and can I speak on the FEMA and Lebanon Street and Sylvan Street? Mr. Chairperson,
We have a couple others in queue. I'll if I can get back to you in the second round of questions. Councilor Eccles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of my questions are for Mr. Ellis tonight. I think that while we're on the topic of disaster mitigation, I just have a few questions about our IT infrastructure and what we could do to maybe, aside from having, including having a generator, what we could do to prepare. So is there precedent for most things to be stored locally in municipalities? Is there a possibility of shifting to sort of more cloud storage in the coming years? It seems like, from what I'm hearing, there's a lot that's coordinated centrally out of City Hall. And then also, if you could just talk about last year, I know that there was an allocation for the new phone system out of free cash. So if you could talk a little bit about the improvements that that's had as far as any given power outage.
Sure. So to answer your first question, money. We would love to do everything. Well, not everything, but cloud-based. Any new software that we're looking at, we are strongly trying to push it to be cloud-based. It is one of the main things. We've had departments approach us with software that is locally installed, and of course it's cheaper, but that's because we have to do everything on the back end and back it up, and there's a lot of licensing for server stuff. I'm renewing some licensing right now that it's basically $1,000 to $2,000 a license, and I have to buy 10 of them. So yes, absolutely, we're strongly looking at cloud. We have been moving toward cloud storage and software as a service. They call it SaaS, where basically the whole software is on the cloud, and we have a few of those now. As it relates to the telephone system, we are going to experience significant cost savings from that project. In fact, we hope to pay for the project. It was $100,000. We're looking at recouping that cost in 15 months in telephone savings. So with the way that we designed this, and we designed it in-house, really. And we investigated different VoIP solutions. VoIP is voice over IP. Myself and my team have experience with several different voice over IP telephone systems, and we investigated a few. We found one that was fairly low cost, and the way that we designed it is such that there will be no more telephone lines coming in to any copper or well, they call them PRI, or it's basically a web-based telephone, digital telephone system. And because we've structured it that way, it eliminates the need for, say, overages by or even costs for long distance or anything else. So you connect to a website for all the phone lines. We would like to have, again, to address your concern about the cloud-based, they do have cloud-based voice over IP systems. We investigated those. The unfortunate thing about those is that they're incredibly expensive. And when we look at a long-term 10-year projection, the cloud-based one was over $1 million more, unfortunately. And this one, we're going to be able to bring our costs for phone systems down to, yeah, like I said, about $80,000, $70,000 to $80,000 a drop over the next year and a half as we can get the phone lines off and onto the new system.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I could use another technician. I'm just going to say up front.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can we just get a quick time check? Your mic's off. Your mic was off. That's a $5
Yep.
fine.
Recording, we're at 2 hours, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Councilor McMaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Ellis. Good evening, Ms. Parakis Ellis. I had one question with respect to the generator. You both talked about how some sort of an emergency could compromise our ability as a city to communicate across city departments, and you both referenced the school. Would the same concern apply to our police and fire dispatch system?
Yes, actually, that is absolutely true. That is the one thing I didn't mention that I was like, yeah, I didn't mention that. But absolutely, yes, the police dispatch system would go down. Their cruisers also phone home via to that dispatch system through the city hall as well. So the cruisers would not be able to do, say, bad guy and plate lookups on the road, nor would they be able to do it in the dispatch and then relay that over the radio. So, you know, if we had God forbid, we had a disaster, like Elena said, we would have no phones at the schools. The police wouldn't be able to look up anybody. They would be in the dark. We'd be in the dark. I mean, yeah, we could pick up cell phones and call each other and get things done, but it'd be a lot more difficult.
Would it prevent the police department from being able to generate a report in their cruisers?
Yes.
Report?
Yes.
How about communicating between the police and the fire department?
Police and fire, they could, right, they have a radio. They would be pretty much limited to radio at that point.
Okay. But there may be certain scenarios where it may not be in the best interest of public safety to put something over the radio. So what I'm getting at is that without being able to communicate over the phone on a particularly sensitive matter that may relate to public safety, not having this generator could impact our ability to provide important public safety services. Thank you both for your time.
Councilor Garapay.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Proakis, excuse me, Ms. Proakis Ellis and Mr. Ellis for being here. I think most of my questions were answered, but just on the school security on the doors, a question, you'd mentioned that when they did the initial study, 1.2 million, was that for completing total doors and locks throughout the system, or was it various projects that they had identified? Sorry, you're on mute.
Mike.
Sorry, I keep muting so you don't get feedback since Neil's in the same house. And I can hear him. So I think I had just said over 1 million. There wasn't a particular figure. It was just that to do all the doors would cost well over $1 million. That was what the information that was given to me by Ann Waite. She had given me all the specific figures as to, you know, the $2,100 per door for the classroom doors, or the $240 for the lock set, or the $22,000 for the exterior doors per door set. So there was definitely a lot of information that went into the numbers, but I think the over $1 million number was just sort of a number thrown out there. So I don't think there is a specific number that is to address all the doors in all the schools.
Okay. Looking at the CIP, the 300,000, I think you'd mentioned this may be for doors and door locks. It says door locks in the CIP, so it'll be a mixture, you believe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was intended to be a mixture. It was intended to address the most serious needs on the exterior doors, the most serious door needs on the classroom doors, and then door locks on a number of classroom doors where the doors are in good shape and are the style of door that we would like, but they just don't have the lock set that we'd like, and those are the ones that we would retrofit.
Okay, and I think you answered my other question was, if we don't, are we going to look at it school by school, complete one school, but we have someone, a new facilities manager that's going to take that on and decide how they want to proceed with that.
Yes.
Just on the FEMA grant, which had a couple questions. This we're approving tonight for the design. Is there any chance that the FEMA grant, with everything going on, you probably can't answer this, but is there any chance that it may not come to fruition? I mean, we haven't, I know they've given us a signal, but they haven't sent us no paperwork or anything like that.
Yeah, so with the FEMA grants, a lot of times they're, at least with the one for Lebanon and Sylvan, that's a hazard mitigation grant program grant. So that is money that's tied to a particular storm in 2018, in March 2018, where there was a federal disaster declared for Massachusetts, and then they allocate a pot of money to address issues in that state based on that declaration. So those funds have already been dedicated. We don't know if our project is going to receive them, but we know that there are a handful of projects in Massachusetts that will receive funding. The pre-disaster mitigation grants, which is the one that now we're applying for the generator for, they're not tied to specific events. And so I would say there's the possibility that they are less secure, but at the same time, I would be surprised if that program, given how it's for disaster planning, I'd be surprised if that was somewhere where funding was suddenly pulled. I would guess that that's sort of an area with heightened awareness right now, where they would be more likely to keep funding.
If we appropriate the FEMA grant, the design, 129,000, and we don't get it awarded, is this a project that we could afford within our budget? I mean, is this something that we would only wait for a FEMA grant to do?
So I'll answer that question for both projects. For the generator project, if we don't get the FEMA grant, this being our highest priority project, that project will get funded. I've been told by Patrick Delarusso that whether it's funded through the grant or funded through our stabilization funds or through our retained earnings, that project will get funded because it has to. It's just too high of a priority to kick it down the road any longer. With the Lebanon at Sylvan drainage project, I would say that was in the category B in the CIP, which was the second highest priority group. So I would think that would really depend on where we are financially. You know, if the design takes 9 months to a year to complete, then we would see where we are at that point and decide if that was a high enough priority. It is really bad when it floods there, and it does have a very severe impact on a handful of homes, and then a somewhat bad impact on another group of homes. And it limits travel and it impacts the sewer system. And there's a number of impacts that we certainly want to address it at some point, but obviously we'd have to see where we are as a community and what other priorities we have.
My other question, which Mr. Delarusso, I believe, answered earlier today, was if we appropriate that, we don't move forward with that FEMA grant, is that money, the money, I believe he says, will end up coming back in free cash, is what I was told. That was a concern I had earlier. Where does 129,000 end up going? But his my understanding, based on what he said, is he would come back to free cash. So if we don't use it in a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I guess that depends on which approach we took. Like with the generator, whether we get the grant funding or not, we'd proceed immediately with the design, and then we would have that design sitting on the shelf. With the
Just not to get, I'm okay with the generator. I was just curious on and I should have been more clear of that when I asked originally.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I've actually been answering on both just because I think it's important for the whole council to understand that even though they're both FEMA projects, there is a difference in the approach. The Lebanon at Sylvan drainage, we would have a choice. If those funds were allocated right now to do the design, we could do the same thing that we're doing with the generator and procure the design and have design documents ready and on the shelf, and then a much better construction number to know what the construction project would entail. And then we just sit on it until we decide to allocate those construction funds at some point down the road. Or we hold off on the design completely. We let that 129,000 just sit in an account, and we only proceed with the design if we know we're getting the construction money. So really, it could go either way, and that would be just however the community and the council wants to handle it.
I think the Sylvan Street, Lebanon Street project it helps twofold. It helps the flooding in the cemetery, which that we know that goes underwater that corner, and it's limited the amount of space they have. So it's hurting revenue down there. If eventually we could fix the flooding, it gives us more capacity. Also, my understanding is it goes down, it's going to go down along the property line by Pine Banks, and we're going to rip up, it's going to be on our property, and it's going to connect in under Pine Banks based on my time on the cemetery. It's also twofolds, ripping up old roads that we're not going to have to fix in the future. So there are a lot of other benefits, and it will allow us, if the Cemetery Commission so chooses, to expand potential lots down there by ripping up some of the roads and depending on how much room we have. So it's twofold, and hopefully it may even be able to get some brush and bushes along the property line that wasn't done with the Pine Banks Dog Park project, and give us some more coverage down there. One other question I have for Mr. Ellis. I know you answered a question that I had regarding the funding in the CIP on the middle school security was 27.5, and it's coming through at 45. I know you sent us an email earlier today. I kind of briefly read over it because I was working and my wife's working 3 to 11, so I had to get my son dinner. Is there any way you could just give us a little synopsis of that, just in case some of my other counselors didn't get a chance to read that? I think you're on mute.
You're on mute. Still on mute. There you go.
There you go. I still can't hear you.
Neil, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you. All IT. Go in the other room.
Go with Elena.
Can't hear you.
I'll tell you what, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield if when he gets it, when he gets that back, I'll yield to someone else and then he can just let us know on that question, okay?
Sounds good. And just want to check in on the well-beings of Councilor McNaught and Councilor Jamaluddin. I don't know if they're still with us, in case we take a vote. President Gregoritis, you're next in queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to thank Ms. Proakis Ellis and Mr. Ellis for providing all of this context. It's really helpful to kind of hear how critical these projects are, and also to Mayor Broder for the overview of free cash and your thinking during this evolving fiscal forecast that we're heading toward for next year. My one question is for Mr. Ellis, so I can hold on that. I did just want to say, for the benefit of my fellow counselors, that I know in a conversation I had with Chief Lyle almost a year ago, he highlighted the generator as something that he is incredibly concerned about the lack of. And I think that this idea of a hypothetical crisis, we're in it. And as someone who has a shared professional history with Councilor McMaster of working with crime victims, we have people who are in their homes right now for the greater public and public safety and public health who are not safe. And the idea that a power outage could prevent a domestic violence victim from being able to reach 911 is something that is really concerning to me. And my question for Mr. Ellis was, if we should lose power right now, does the call box that's outside of the police department for residents who are not able to physically access the building because of the accessibility issues associated with that building, would that call box go down as well?
We can't
hear you.
Try.
Hold on one second.
There you are.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I think the problem, that box out there actually operates through a copper telephone line, which unfortunately Verizon has notified us that they'll be removing all copper lines from Melrose. It also calls 911 again. That's through a copper line. We're in the process of repairing that box right now. Actually, I personally hate that box. I want to rip it out and put in a real call box that is kind of a closed system into dispatch, or connects to one of the phones but doesn't call a phone number to get back in. With respect to, I think I caught a little bit of what you were saying at the end about 911. The 911 system, the next generation 911 system that the police have, is actually a separate system from the phone system that we operate through City Hall. So if we were down and someone called 911, I have to do this with my hand if I talk about phones, then they would definitely be able to get to the dispatch.
So it's the non-emergency numbers that would be impacted.
Yes. In communication between them and maybe
Right.
fire. Yeah,
Okay. And obviously between City Hall and the schools.
correct. And I'm sorry, I missed Councilor Garapay's question. I screwed up my.
President Gregoritis, you finished with your questioning?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else for the first time? Councilor Garapay, did you want to follow up on that?
Mr. Ellis, I know I had a question earlier that I submitted when talking to Mr. Della Russo regarding the dollar amount of 45,000 in the CIP. We had 27.5. I know you had sent out an email. I didn't really get a chance to take a good look at it, and I'm not sure if my counselors, in case they haven't, if you could just give us a little synopsis of what that was, what it said.
Sure. So the original So the original quote was basically via a walkthrough that we were doing for the camera system in the middle school. So which continues to be a problem. We have issues with the middle school cameras. Again, they were put in with the school, and we're looking at those. But we were with our vendor, Lantel, who maintains and installs most of our security equipment, and we showed them that system, and they gave us kind of a working quote to kind of present without really a thorough inspection of the system. And just from my experience with installing a number of these systems, my gut feeling was that it was going to be closer to 45 to be safe. And I was able to do a walkthrough with Lantel 2.5 weeks ago, and they gave me a quote that was almost $40,000. I eliminated things to get it down to that amount. Might have to add a couple things. We're in negotiations, but it's going to hover around that amount, 40,000, and then just as a small contingency in case we have to do any additional work or wiring, which is always an issue. You get into these buildings, and then it turns out you need to run a wire because something's not working, and that adds on another couple grand. So that 45 should cover us with a contingency.
Okay. One other question I forgot to ask with the doors, and then the door security for the middle school and the door locks. Is that a project, if it's approved tonight, that will think it'll be completed before school starts? What's the time frame on that?
Yes, that's something that I could pull the trigger on very soon. I would expect to do it, spring, summer.
And the same thing with the locks, you think, Elena, for the
I think it depends on the projects. It depends on what Jay identifies as the top priority projects, because sometimes there are long lead times on specific items if there are certain doors that we need to order that are custom. Retrofitting locks, I would imagine, would be something we could do over the summer, though.
with us to just take advantage of
Right.
what spaces we have. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Proakis Ellis, I know there's only about 7 weeks left in the fiscal year. What is the likelihood of hearing from FEMA regarding that grant for the Lebanon and Sylvan project?
Highly unlikely, only because the additional information they've requested, I believe it's due to them on June 12th. And so they work at a snail's pace. And my guess is that the chances of them turning that back around in 3 weeks to say whether we got the money or not is highly unlikely.
All right, thank you. I just like, to enter into the record, this is obviously my neighborhood in Ward 7. Former council president Scott Forbes has worked on this. Prior to that, board president Bill Forbes worked on this. This whole area was pretty ravaged during the Mother's Day storm about 15 years ago. I got water in my basement that year too, as did many neighbors, and we had to reach out for FEMA assistance in this neighborhood. So, even if we don't get funding in FY20, I'd like to make sure that this stays as a top priority for not only the city, but Ward 7. So thank you very much for all your work on this.
Thank you.
What is the will of the committee? President Gregoritis. Mic is off.
Muted.
I would like to make a motion for a recommendation for passage.
Second.
A motion for recommendation for passage by President Gregoritis, seconded by Councilor Tramatozzi. Discussion, any other discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Councilor Tramatozzi.
Yes.
Councilor McMaster.
Yes.
Councilor McNaught.
Yes.
Councilor Eccles.
Yes.
Councilor Garapay.
Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin,
Yes.
Councilor President Gregoritis,
Yes.
Chairman Sanella.
Yes.
11 yes.
Next order,
Wait,
Thank you.
Thank you.
2020-76. Authorizing in the bond, a bond in the amount of $1,450,000 to replace the Department of Public Works salt shed. Anna, did you want to speak to this? Do you have any new information for us from our
Yes.
prior meeting?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't hear you for a second there. So I did send out a couple of additional items of information today. We've drafted up the request for qualifications for design services. We've estimated the design cost to be $100,000, and the scope of services for that design contract would involve starting with an alternatives analysis to look at the existing structure, what the what the limitations are. I suppose, if the council wanted us to look at the integrity of the existing structure as well, we could do a quick analysis of that. I will say, to the point of one of the public commenters, that there is sheathing underneath the roof on a large portion of the building, just not the whole thing. If you look at the pictures, you can see it. So we can look a little bit more at the existing structure as part of that RFQ. I wouldn't want to, frankly, spend a lot of time or money doing that, because I really don't think that building is salvageable. But if we want a structural engineer to say it's not, then we can have somebody come in and take a look as part of that alternatives analysis, the first phase of the design process. We have advertised for that RFQ. There's no financial obligation for having put the ad in the Central Register, so we decided just to get the ad in there so that if it did get approved tonight, we could move forward immediately, given the time constraints with the design. So if you had a chance to take a look, I know it just came through today, but if you have to look at the scope of services, the first task is to, I think it's actually shown as task 2 after project management, is to present to us the cost benefit of the various different types of materials of construction, different types of salt sheds, so that we can then proceed with what we think works best for the city and is the most cost effective. I believe there was some language, should the council choose to allocate just the design funds, there was some revised bond language that would allow for that to happen if you so choose. And then the last bit of information that I was asked to follow up on was the potential for grant funding through Mass DOT. And I did correspond with our state aid contact at Mass DOT District 4. And he indicated that the salt shed grant program ended actually a number of years ago. And that the reference on the website to the communities, how many communities have been helped by Mass DOT for building salt sheds, that was largely through that grant program. However, they do still help communities, but they only help through the Chapter 90 program. And our annual Chapter 90 allocation is on the order of $530,000. And we use that for the majority of our paving each year and sidewalk work, supplemented by whatever road bonds we end up having approved. But if we were to try to fund the salt shed with our Chapter 90 funds, that would mean nearly 3 years of Chapter 90 funds going solely to the salt shed and none left over for paving in those 3 years. So I would not recommend that approach.
Any questions? I don't saw anybody raise their hands. If you could raise your hand, if you have a question. Seeing up, Councilor Tramatose.
yes, thank you. Elena, I feel that we should at least have a structural engineer take a look at the existing building. I agree, don't spend a lot of money on it, but I think we should for the sake of the public and for our edification, that we are satisfied that it's not structurally sound and cannot be salvaged, then we'll move on to the next step. And the next step is, I think there are alternatives to sheds that we definitely want to take a look at, less expensive and potentially just as durable. And I would go along with the amendment by substitution of the order as directed in the email that we received from the committees. So I would make that motion to amend by substitution the order inserting the language of bond council revising that amount. Thank you.
Well, Council McNaught.
Is this still in discussion before we vote on that order? Or this motion?
Yes, for sure. And I will withdraw that amendment, that motion, to give an opportunity for others to discuss it, but we are in discussion, sure.
I'll withdraw the second.
Thank you. Council McNaught.
My only question was, if we go the route of having another engineer look at the building, do we need to move forward with that amended motion?
We don't currently have an engineer under contract to do anything with regard to this building. So the first step, no matter what we're going to do, is to bring an engineer on board to do the alternatives analysis and then to design whatever that alternatives analysis whatever we decide needs to be designed. So it's the procuring of a design consultant is what allows us to do a structural evaluation and alternatives analysis and a design. So we would still need to move forward with that.
And I'm sorry, I should have been more clear. Would it cost the full 100 to do that?
Whatever we end up designing, I believe will cost the full 100, because just the process of developing a set of CAD drawings and specifications that are appropriate for bidding in a low bid situation. That's the situation that we're always in, is, you know, even if the improvements ended up being something much less substantial than a brand new building, we still have to put that out to bid under mass procurement law, and we still have to pick the low bidder unless we have a really good reason not to. So we still need an extremely detailed set of plans and specifications. So one way or another, we have to go through that full design process.
Thank you. And just for clarification, I am inclined to support the amended motion of my fellow councilor, Chairman Tosi. Thank you.
Councilor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Perakis-Ellis. Appreciate you meeting with us tonight. I just wanted to offer that a constituent reached out today and shared about a salt shed that Fitchburg had built recently. It was completed in the fall of 2019. This was a replacement, as it was stated. The prior structure was, quote, decades old and heavily deteriorated. There's a YouTube video out on in public domain that you can see the shed, and it looks very, very similar to the shed that we are under consideration. The cost was 40% of what we're talking about here. The cost was $575,000 for that shed. I would encourage you to explore that. The Commissioner of the Public Works, his name is Nicholas Bosanato. He's the one that's on the YouTube video that is speaking about the newly constructed shed. It was supported by Mayor Steve DiNatale, which maybe Mayor Broder has a relationship with. So I would strongly encourage an exploration of, why the cost was so much less, and if it is a similar construction value and comparable to what we're looking to do. So with that, I would support Mr. Trementosi's suggestion that we look at the alternative as well to see what it would take on a replacement cost as opposed to strictly a rip and replace.
Councilor Stewart, I just want to jump in here for a second and let you know, I am very familiar with Mayor Di Natale. We served together in the legislature for a significant amount of time. He's a good friend, and I am happy to reach out to him to see how Fitchburg made the magic happen.
And Councillor Stewart, we will definitely take a look at what they did. I'm as interested as the council is in alternative designs here. I agree that it's a high price tag in that initial estimate that we got, and I'm very interested in what else there is out on the market.
Yeah, I would encourage you just to take a look at the YouTube. It's like a 2-minute video, but you get a pretty clear. I mean, it's got all the frame. I don't know anything about this stuff, but a lot of this, the wooden framing structure, and it looks like the same size, and it's basically designed to, have a truck drive in and pick up the salt and get the salt out of there, right? So, and I think that's what we're looking for. So, if we can do it for $600K, I think that's a much better option than the 1.4 million.
I mentioned before when in a perhaps subtle reference to this when I was talking about the generator. I would like to spend zero on this. This is not, no one goes, oh my God, this guy's killing it and the council's killing it. Look at that salt shed, right? And the best thing that you can probably say about a salt shed is that no one talks about it, and hopefully no one talks about it for 20 years or whatever the lifespan of it is. It is a very, I'm not an engineer. I have engineers in my family, and I respect the wisdom of the craft, to be sure. The current structure is not viable, but certainly I view this, and I know Ms. Proikaselis does as well, as a value proposition. We want the most bang for our buck. We are not looking for the Cadillac. I would respectfully say, I think that the mindful of, we do have some aesthetic standards, and we are probably not going to go the tarp it up and throw some tires on it. It's in the middle of the city, and it's near some significant development, either the housing or the fields that we've done. But no one is more interested in me than getting this, getting the best value possible for our money out of this. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Eccles.
It's getting late, so I just have one quick question, which is, in the original language of a memo that you wrote said that ideally next winter. Can you kind of either put that off the table, that timeline off the table, or tell us how we could possibly meet that deadline? It seems like if we're altering the way that the process as far as the design and doing the design first could have hindered that or eliminated it. So if you could just clarify. Yeah.
There's actually no change to the process right now in terms of the timeline, because we did still advertise for the request for qualifications. That document will be available next Wednesday. So I have the opportunity to add in whatever language comes out of tonight in terms of, a sentence about wanting a structural engineer to look at the existing structure and give an opinion on that. So we're still on track we are as on track now as we were a couple weeks ago. We are still in an extremely aggressive time frame for having a new salt shed for next winter. But what I can say is that at least if we can get the design completed, out to bid, I don't know what the new salt shed's going to look like. Perhaps it's some sort of prefab, a new foundation with a prefab structure that sits on top of it that just arrives one day in the city and gets placed on top of the foundation. That might be a very quick construction sequence. If it's building a truss structure like we have now, I would imagine that takes a lot longer. So, until we really get into the design, we don't know whether it's going to be feasible or not, but we are going to push through this design phase as quickly as we can, as quickly as whatever consultant we bring on board can, and get it out to bid as quickly as we can. And then from there, we see where we end up and what time of year it is.
Thank you.
Councilor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Proikaselis, quickly, in your professional opinion, do you think the current salt shed as it currently is, could survive another winter. We had a very mild winter in 19 and 20. There's no guarantee that 2021 will be another mild winter. What do you think of the state of our current salt shed?
I think I indicated last time that I did feel nervous being in it. I felt like it was, one small accident away from the potential for something to collapse. If we're in a situation where we have to get by with it for one more winter, we will just do everything we can to do that safely. But I would love to see it gone before the winter.
And again, briefly, once we have a design engineer, we can kind of, give that design engineer within the realm of what he's calling for, the guidelines of whether we want a canopy style or a truss style salt shed. And we can kind of steer within the realm of his professional opinion as well, right? Of what we're looking for.
Yeah, the way the RFQ is written, they would give us an alternatives analysis just outlining, here are the possible types of salt sheds that you could put on that site. Here's a conceptual cost estimate, and here are the pros and cons. And then we pick what we want, and then that's what they design. So that's the way it's written.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Anybody else that I missed? See any other hands go up? What is the will of this committee? Councilor Trematosi, do you want to reintroduce?
Yeah, so I'll rephrase it then. That at this time I'll move to substitute, strike that, to amend the motion by substituting the language that bond counsel has offered to us, and I believe everybody has a copy of it, and that is be it ordered by the city council that the sum of $100,000 be hereby is appropriated to pay cost of conducting a planning study and final design for replacing the Department of Public Works salt shed, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the clerk of committees has the proposed language.
I do.
Does everybody have the proposed language or read it?
Yes, I second that motion.
On discussion, is there any discussion? So we have a motion on the floor. Councilor Trematosi, seconded by Councilor McNaught to amend the order.
Councilor Stewart has his hand up.
Councilor Stewart?
Yeah, point of clarification, what is the amended language?
All right, I'll read the amended language that the language be substituted as follows: that the city council, that by order of the city council, that the sum of $100,000 be and hereby is appropriated to pay costs for conducting a planning study and final design for replacing the Department of Public Works salt shed, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, Subsection 7, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the city therefore, and that any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this order, lest any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this order in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Councilor?
has the motion already been made and seconded? Because I just had one point on discussion.
Yep, no, we're still on discussion, but it has been made and seconded, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one concern that I have is this language suggests that we are going to replace as opposed to potentially repair. And I'm wondering whether or not that language should say to repair or replace, depending on what the structural engineer determines and what the assessment determines. So I just feel like we're getting a little too far ahead of ourselves if it says replace, because to me, that would, we all know something needs to happen. And as the mayor said, this isn't the type of order I think he wants to send before us. I credit the mayor, he's sending it before us because something has to happen. But I'm not convinced yet that it has to be replaced if we haven't had an engineer conduct a study yet. So that's my concern. If the language is as it is, I would be inclined not to support it based on that one issue. If it was the will of the committee to withdraw both the motion for passage and the second and add in the word repair, I would be more comfortable with that.
Point of order, if I could. Well taken. And what I could suggest is that we insert the word repair, repair and or replace on the third line of that order where it says replacing. So conducting a planning study and final design for repairing or replacing the Department of Public Works. Salt shed.
Trementozzi, might I suggest pulling in Art Flavin, who's in queue, just to.
Do we have Solicitor Van Campen with us as well?
We do, only because this is from bond counsel.
Bring them in.
Yep, I'm doing that right now. Chairman Snell, would you like Patrick as well, the city auditor? Or no?
May I suggest that we at least remove the motion in the second? I think we're pretty confident we're doing that. I'll remove my second, John.
Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion to so we can resolve this.
Okay, motion's withdrawn.
Art, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Rob, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
You paying attention?
I'm not. Art, did you hear what I had to say about the? I was reading the order and exactly as written, except that we wanted to, on a concern from some of the council members, to add repair or replace on the third line of that order.
Well, in my opinion, I mean, the language you have in front of you is from bond counsel that would be it's legal and what we can do going forward. If out of this $100,000 that you spend and it comes more better, for lack of a better word, to repair it, which is probably highly unlikely, that would be allowed. This is $100,000 to look at the plan and design. It doesn't need to say repair. If part of the plan and design process is repair, so be it. And they come up with a number for that. They can come up with a number for repair and they can come up with a number for replace. We're splitting hairs here. I think it's important with the timeline to go forward. I think if you want to add that language, we'd have to go back to bond counsel, which would be another week and another meeting and another resolution. I'm not sure that's where we want to go with this. I think it's $100,000 to look at the situation, in my opinion, and then they will come back with plan design studies. Plan design studies could be repair. I'm done.
Thank you. Councilor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we're splitting hairs. I think it's necessary to have that language in there because when I read design for replacing, that to me limits ourselves. And I think we need to have in consideration the repairing option as well as the replacing option. So from my standpoint, I don't think this is splitting hairs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor McNaught.
Mr. City Solicitor, do you agree with Mr. Flavin's interpretation of the language? Or do you think we should add in repair or replace?
Well, as I was listening to the debate and I heard Councilor McMaster's comment, frankly, the amendment is insignificant. If you want to add the word or repair to the order, I don't see that as a substantial change to the language that's been prepared by bond counsel. So I think quite frankly, to move this process along. The amendment, to the extent that is the will of this body, feel free to make it this evening so that we can move this forward. I think the priority here is to move the project forward, and adding that word or that phrase "or repair," in my estimation, is relatively insignificant.
I agree.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, just back on discussion, the $100,000 we're looking for the design engineer, is that part of the 1.45 bond amount?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else?
No,
Councillor,
it's a completely separate and distinct order.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Art,
for
I think the-
100,000. You're
I
only
think-
committing 100,000 right now.
Art, I think the question was just, was the 100,000 part of the original 1.45 million cost estimate? Which it was.
Okay.
Councillor Tremontosi, do you want to reintroduce your motion, adding in the new language?
Yes, thank you. So I will move that we substitute the following language to order 2020-76, and that is that be it ordered by the city council that the sum of $100,000 be and hereby is appropriated to pay costs of conducting a planning study and final design for repairing or replacing the Department of Public Works salt shed, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto. And that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, subsection 7, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the city therefore, and that any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this order, thus any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this order in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
We have a second.
Second.
So we have a second to amend this, motion to amend this order by Councillor Tremontosi to $100,000. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Seconded by Councillor Garapay. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Councillor Tremontosi.
Yes.
Councillor McMaster.
Yes.
Councillor McNaught.
Yes.
Councillor Eccles.
Yes.
Councillor Garapay.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Thomas.
Yes.
Councillor Jamaluddin.
Yes. Yes.
Gregoritis.
Yes.
Chair Sinella.
Yes.
11 yes.
Madam Clerk, we just make sure that this is attached to. I'm sure you'll do that.
Yes, sir.
Last up, we have order number 2020-79, the establishment of an OSHA reserve stabilization fund. City solicitor wants to say a few words in regards to this. Solicitor Van Campen.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman, I couldn't hear you for a minute there. So the order before you tonight is to create a standalone stabilization fund entitled the OSHA Stabilization Fund. And the purpose of this, for members' edification, in March of 2018, Governor Baker signed into law Chapter, I believe, 44 of the Acts of 2018, which effectively set as a minimum federal OSHA standards for public employees throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And as part of that legislation, the legislature created what is known as the Occupational Health and Safety Hazard Advisory Board. And that body is charged with promulgating rules and regulations governing workplace safety for public employees. They are also charged with considering and studying training programs, workplace safety issues, data, etc. So the purpose of this fund this evening is basically to put the city in a position to have a small reserve, which would be intended to pay expenses associated with any required training, any required safety measures that the city of Melrose would be required to comply with as mandated by this advisory board, provide our employees with personal protective equipment to perform their jobs. And the ultimate goal here is to allow the city the resources to ensure that our workplace, both City Hall, Public Works, our public safety buildings, our library, all of our facilities, safe and free from any hazards for all of our employees. So I'll answer any questions you folks may have, and I know Mr. Delarusso is here as well for that purpose.
Questions? I didn't see any hands go up. I might have missed anybody. Councilor Tramitozzi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know how much we, I guess, Mr. Delarusso, when do you anticipate the amount of the initial funding to be?
If Mr. Delarusso is not on the call, Kristen?
He is. I'm trying to make him, sorry, I'm trying to make him a panelist right now. Sorry about that. Coming in right now. I'm hoping.
I think I can answer that if memory serves. We anticipate it being $50,000.
Patrick, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we, as the mayor had indicated, we'd like to start with 50. If we could do even higher, 100, that would be probably the initial one of, a limit for the year. One of the things that we have to be sensitive to is the fact that as we've experienced things with special ed, for example, on the school side, suits and claims, contracts, stabilization fund, a lot of times we incur these costs mid-year, or they come to us mid-year after the budget has been established. And for, as Rob was saying, as the mayor was saying, we need a resource that we can access to address that need at the time it comes to us. So with that initial deposit, we would then seek the council to approve any expenditures from the fund. At that point, we would explain what the purpose was, what the nature was. And again, I think it's strategic, as we've done before. We want to be ahead of the curve. We don't want to be in a position where we face a penalty for not complying. Sometimes they do, they can hit you with a financial penalty. You haven't complied in a certain amount of time. So I think this is extremely strategic. I think it's going to give us an opportunity to see actually where we land. What are we going to see a year from now, 2 years from now, perhaps 3 years from now? But I think if there's anything else, if you prepare, and you're in a much better position to address it than those that are not prepared. So I do support that through the respect to the council.
If I can add, so I have a bit of expertise about this because I was the chair of the Labor and Workforce Development Committee when this bill was passed through the legislature. And it's based on a very simple premise, the idea that if you go to work in the morning, you should be able to come home. And in a strange, I suppose, quirk of the law, those federal protections were not provided to municipal and certain other public employees. And that's just wrong. But that also creates an obligation on the part of municipalities to make sure that we are in compliance. So as the auditor said, there are certainly going to be training implications, and there are also we are now, I will say exposed, but I don't mean it that way because we welcome it. There's an audit function to OSHA and their state counterparts in the Division of Labor Standards. And they may, if they choose to audit us and identify things that we need to fix or correct, I, quite frankly, for myself, I welcome that. I want a safe workplace for our employees, and having those resources available, if either from a training perspective or to take corrective action, is very, very important to me. I know it's important to the employees of the city, and I'm sure it's important to you guys as well. And that is one of when I spoke earlier about, some of the reserve funds and the hedging any potential exposure. This is exactly what I mean. This is the kind of thing that we want to be able to react to efficiently, make sure we have the funds available to deal with any unexpected costs, because the costs that we incur in this area will be about employee protection, and that's critically important.
That's good. Excellent. Thank you all for that explanation. Because the worker and safety is very important and critical. I assume it's not anticipated that if there were to be any injury claims, it's not paid from this stabilization fund.
That is correct.
Correct.
And hopefully there will not be any, because we are thinking ahead in providing for safety measures through this stabilization fund. Thank you. Thank you all.
Councilor Eccles.
Thank you.
Councilor Eccles.
My question was about violation. Councilor Tramatozzi.
Councilor Garapay.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Mrs. Del Russo.
Thank you.
And Campen. I got a quick question regarding the parameters around in this stabilization. We talk about purchase of equipment. Are we talking more or less safety supplies instead of equipment? Like, for example, say a scissor lift. A scissor lift, one would think would go into the recently established capital equipment stabilization fund. So can you just give me some clarification on what we're talking about on equipment? Is there a threshold dollar amount that I would assume something like a forklift or whatever would be going under the capital equipment and wouldn't be coming out of here? Like, we doing safety gloves, nettings, whatever, You could just give me a little bit of clarification on that. I'd appreciate it.
Again, through the chair, absolutely, Council. Great question. We have, as everyone is aware, we do have a capital stabilization fund. And for the purposes as outlined in that fund, expenditures typically are $25,000 minimum that we draw from the capital fund. In this particular instance, Councilor, some of the expenses could be for training. There might be $3,500, $4,000 for bring a special training in, for example, for our DPW workers or the public safety workers. You might bring someone on the outside in. You may need gloves, specialized gloves or mask for some of the DPW workers that may do sensitive work. Those kind of expenses required by OSHA. And there may be expenses that even this evening that we, like I know myself, I'm not aware of, that are coming down the road that we're going to have to meet the compliance. And it's for things like that typically are not your higher end expenses. Obviously, if we were getting a front loader or something like that, a piece of equipment like that, that would fall under the capital fund. This is really designed to handle those specific needs for again, as it indicates, professional guidance, training, equipment purchases, anything really required to help in the workplace to meet the OSHA guidelines. So that type of expense is what we're looking to address here.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Did I miss anybody? What is the will of the committee?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
Motion to recommend full board by Councilor Tramatozzi, seconded by Councilor Stewart. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Councilor Tramatozzi.
Yes.
Councilor McMaster.
Yes.
Councilor McNaught.
Yes.
Councilor Eccles.
Yes.
Councilor Garapay.
Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
President Gregoritis.
Yes.
Chairman Sinella.
Yes.
11 yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
1 second. Councilor Garapay. Councilor Garapay.
Sorry, I've almost forgot. Point of privilege. Oh gosh. you know, as we all know, this past week has been Nurses Week, or Nurses Week, and yesterday, I believe, was Nurses Day. And as Counselor Ward 4, having the hospital in our in my ward and in our city, I'd like to publicly acknowledge all the nurses, especially my wife Andrea, who happens to be working night shifts now. So,
Don't forget your
I'd
mom.
like to publicly. And my mother. I'd like to thank all the nurses for all they do, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. I appreciate you giving me that.
Here, here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms.
Happy Mother's Day to the moms on the council and everyone else out there.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Sinella.
President Gregoritis.
I'm sorry, before we get to a motion to adjourn, I wanted to make a motion to attach all of the correspondence that we received to Order 2020-69 regarding Memorial Hall to be included in the record.
Second.
Motion to attach all the correspondence made by President Gregoritis, seconded by Counselor Eccles. Madam Clerk.
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Counselor Trementozzi.
Yes.
Counselor McMaster.
Yes.
Counselor McNaught.
Yes.
Counselor Eccles.
Yes.
Counselor Garapay.
Yes.
Counselor Stewart.
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Counselor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
President Gregoritis.
Yes.
Chairman Zanella.
Yes.
11 yes.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Adjourn. Counselor Migliarelli, seconded by Counselor McNaught. The final time, if you could call the roll.
Vice Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Counselor Trementozzi.
Yes.
Counselor McMaster.
Yes.
Counselor McNaught.
Yes.
Counselor Eccles. Counselor Garapay.
Yes.
Counselor Stewart.
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Counselor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
President Gregoritis.
Yes.
Chairman Sinella.
Yes.
11 yes. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.